The slipspace rupture tore open above Manhattan at 14:37 hours Eastern Standard Time. A wound in reality that screamed across every electromagnetic spectrum. It wasn't elegant like the Chitauri portal that had hung over Stark Tower 18 months prior. This was violent, a churning vortex of distorted space-time that made the air itself scream as physics tried to reconcile the impossible. Then Infinity came through. 5.7 kilometers of gun-gray titanium and Forerunner enhanced alloys materialized in low Earth orbit, momentum carrying it forward at 300 meters per second until maneuvering thrusters fired in perfectly coordinated burns. The warship's profile blotted out the afternoon sun, casting a shadow across lower Manhattan that stretched from the financial district to Central Park. Emergency broadcasts lit up every channel. Cars stopped in streets. People poured from buildings, staring upward at something that made the helicarrier look like a Coast Guard cutter. On Infinity's bridge, Captain Thomas Lasky gripped the command throne's armrests as damage reports scrolled across holographic displays. Status: Slip space drive is shot, sir. Commander Palmer reported, her Spartan armor's shield still flickering from the emergency transit. That wasn't a clean jump. We punched through something. Dimensional barriers, maybe. Engineering saying the Shaw Fujikawa drive needs a complete overhaul before we're jumping anywhere. Weapons? Mac guns nominal. Archer pods at 85%. Point defense active. Shields holding at 73% and climbing. Palmer's voice carried the clipped efficiency of someone who'd fought through worse. We're combat effective. Lasky studied the tactical display. 1 planet, 1 moon, 1 star, Sol system configuration, but the astronomical positions were wrong, not by much. Degrees, not light years. Where the hell are we? Unknown, sir. The navigation officer's fingers danced across her. Console. Star charts don't match any known configuration. We're definitely in Sol system space, but this isn't our Sol system. Planetary positions are off. There's significantly more orbital traffic than there should be. And sir? She paused. There's no sign of any UNSC infrastructure, no defense platforms, no shipyards, nothing. A proximity alarm shrieked. Lasky's eyes snapped to the tactical display, where 3 contacts were accelerating toward them at impossible speeds. Not missiles, not fighters. The sensor profile made no sense. Organic heat signatures wrapped in metal, moving at Mach 4 and climbing. Multiple incoming contacts. The tactical officer called. They're not broadcasting IFF. Velocity and maneuverability exceed any known. Visual, Lasky ordered. The main viewport shifted, magnifying the lead contact. A man in red and gold armor, repulsor trails blazing behind him, flanked by 2 additional armored figures. They weren't ships, they were people, flying under their own power. Palmer's hand moved to her sidearm. Sir, what am I looking at? Before Lasky could answer, the facility-wide comm crackled. Attention, unidentified vessel. The voice was male, confident, carrying the particular arrogance of someone accustomed to being the smartest person in any room. This is Iron Man of the Avengers initiative. You violated international airspace, triggered about 600 different defense protocols, and scared the hell out of 8 million New Yorkers. I'm going to need you to power down weapons, explain what that light show was about, and tell me why I shouldn't call in the really big guns. Lasky exchanged glances with Palmer. Avengers? No UNSC presence? Unknown defenders with personal flight capability. And they were treating Infinity like an invasion force. The dimensional rift. They hadn't jumped through space, they jumped through realities. Get me, Master Chief, Lasky said quietly. In the armory 3 decks below, John 117 was already moving. The slip space rupture had felt wrong the moment it began. his augmented nervous system registering the dimensional distortion before the ship's sensors confirmed it. Now, standing in full Mjolnir Mark 6 Gen 3 armor, he checked his MA-5D assault rifle's magazine with practiced efficiency and holstered his M6H2 Magnum. The motion tracker in his HUD showed the organized chaos of a ship at combat readiness. Marines moving to defensive positions, Spartans checking equipment, pilots prepping fighters. Cortana would have analyzed this situation in milliseconds, offered 3 tactical assessments and 2 sarcastic observations. But Cortana was gone, lost to rampancy on Requiem. The familiar weight of that absence settled across John's shoulders as he sealed his helmet. "Chief," Captain Lasky's voice came through the secure channel. "We've got a situation. Unknown contacts approaching, claiming authority over Earth defense. They want to talk, but I need you on the bridge. If this goes sideways, you're our ace." "On my way." John's response was economical as always. He crossed the armory in long strides, his armor's shields humming at full charge, and headed for the nearest gravlift. Through the ship's hull, he could feel the subtle vibration of active shield generators and charging Mac capacitors. Infinity was ready for a fight. The question was whether this new Earth needed them to be. Outside, Iron Man hovered 200 meters from Infinity's starboard bow, his armor's sensors struggling to penetrate the warship's hull. "Jarvis, tell me you're getting something useful." "The vessel's composition includes several unknown alloys, sir. Energy readings suggest active shielding technology and what appear to be magnetic accelerator weapons of considerable yield. I'm detecting approximately 17,000 life signs aboard, all human." Tony Stark's eyes narrowed behind his faceplate. 17,000 people on a ship that could double as a flying city, appearing through a hole in space over the same spot where aliens invaded 18 months ago. "Yeah, this is going to be a long day. Cap, you getting all this?" "Copy that, Iron Man." Captain America's voice carried across the Avengers tactical channel from the Quinjet approaching from the south. "Shields scrambling every asset they have. Fury wants to contain this before it escalates." "Little late for that," Tony muttered, watching as gun ports the size of subway tunnels tracked his position with unnerving precision. "I think we're past contained and heading straight for international incident." On the bridge of the UNSC Infinity, Master Chief stepped up beside Captain Lasky and stared out at the planet below. Blue oceans, green continents, swirling cloud formations. Earth. But not his Earth. Somewhere in the multiverse, humanity had survived without the UNSC, without Spartans, without 30 years of war against the Covenant. He needed to understand what kind of world this was before deciding whether to trust it. "Open a channel," Lasky ordered. "Let's see if we can do this the diplomatic way." The comm crackled to life. "Iron Man, this is Captain Thomas Lasky of the UNSC Infinity. We mean no harm to your world. We've experienced a critical navigation failure and request time to assess our situation and make repairs. We're willing to discuss terms, but I need you to understand, this ship carries 17,000 lives. I won't put them at risk. Not for anyone." Tony processed that. Polite, direct, but with an underlying edge that said these people had been in real fights before. "Appreciate the candor, Captain, but you've got to understand our perspective. Last time someone opened a portal over New York, we had an alien invasion. So forgive us for being a little jumpy when a ship the size of Rhode Island shows up unannounced." John watched the tactical display as more contacts appeared. Aircraft, both conventional and anti-gravity, forming a perimeter. Below on the planet's surface, entire cities were watching. This world's humanity didn't know about Reach, about Harvest, about Installation 04. They'd never faced the Covenant's genocide or the Flood's horror. Maybe they'd been lucky. Or maybe they just hadn't met the real monsters yet. If you want to see more crossover battles and unexpected universe collisions, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character in universe you'd want to see in the comments below. Let's explore the infinite together. The standoff held for 3 seconds that stretched like hours. Then Lasky made his decision. We'll accept a diplomatic meeting. Small delegation, neutral ground. But understand this, Iron Man. My ship stays fully operational. We fought too hard to survive to lower our guard now. Fair enough, Tony replied, already running probability calculations on how this could go wrong. There's a shield facility upstate. Secure, neutral enough. Bring whoever you trust. We'll bring ours. Let's figure out if we're going to be neighbors or something else. As the channel closed, John turned to Lasky. Sir, if this is a trap, then we spring it on our terms. Lasky finished. Pick your team, Chief. We're about to find out what kind of Earth this is. Through the viewport, the sun glinted off Iron Man's armor as he banked away, followed by his escort. Below, a world held its breath, and aboard Infinity, 17,000 UNSC personnel prepared for whatever came next. The dimensional rift that had brought them here was already sealing, space-time knitting itself closed with visible ripples of distorted light. But something else flickered at the edges of the closure. Sensor ghosts, energy signatures that made the tactical officer frown and run the scan twice. By the time she flagged it for investigation, the signatures were gone. Whatever had followed them through had already disappeared into the vast dark between Earth and Mars. The shield facility designated Site Gamma 7 sat in the Catskill Mountains, far enough from population centers to contain a disaster and close enough to New York for rapid response. It had been built after the Battle of New York as one of several contingency sites, places where humanity could negotiate with threats too dangerous to bring into the city. Today, its conference room hosted something unprecedented. First contact with humanity from another dimension. Master Chief stood at parade rest near the reinforced windows, his motion tracker displaying the tactical situation with perfect clarity. 37 shield agents in the facility, 12 with elevated heart rates suggesting combat readiness, 3 heat signatures in the adjacent room that registered as enhanced, faster metabolisms, denser muscle mass, the Avengers. Outside, 2 Pelican dropships maintained holding patterns at 3,000 meters, ready for emergency extraction. Spartans Thorn, Madsen, and Grant held security positions at strategic choke points throughout the facility. Captain Lasky sat across the conference table from Nick Fury, director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Between them, a holographic display projected from a UNSC data pad showed star charts, ship specifications, and carefully edited mission logs. Maria Hill stood behind Fury, her hand never far from her sidearm, analyzing every detail with the cold efficiency of a career intelligence officer. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Fury said, his single eye fixed on Lasky with unsettling intensity. You're from an alternate Earth where humanity has been fighting a 30-year war against a collective of alien species called the Covenant. You've lost multiple colony worlds, billions of casualties, and you've only survived because of supersoldiers and warships that make our helicarrier look like a crop duster. That's accurate, Lasky confirmed. The Covenant was a religious alliance of multiple species united by belief in ancient artifacts left by a precursor race called the Forerunners. They declared humanity heretics and attempted complete genocide. We've been fighting for survival since 2525. Hill's stylus stopped moving across her tablet. 2525? Captain, our current year is 2013. In our dimension, it's 2558, Lasky replied evenly. We've been at war for 33 years. The Covenant formally fell in 2553, but remnant factions are still active. We were engaging one such fleet when our slip-space drive malfunctioned and brought us here. Fury leaned back, processing. John watched the director's vitals remain steady, elevated but controlled. This was a man accustomed to processing impossible information. "And the big guy by the window? Your Master Chief?" "Petty Officer John 117, Lasky said. And John registered the slight shift in attention from everyone in the room. "He's a Spartan, too. The program that created him began when he was 6 years old. Genetic augmentation, cybernetic enhancement, powered armor. He's one of the most decorated soldiers in UNSC history." 6 years old? Hill repeated, her tone carefully neutral, but her heartbeat spiking. "You recruited children." "We conscripted children," John said, his voice cutting through the room's tension like a blade. He turned from the window, his gold-tinted visor reflecting the fluorescent lights. 75 of us. It was unethical. It was necessary. The UNSC was losing the war before Spartans turned the tide. We became what humanity needed to survive. The silence that followed was broken by the conference room door opening. Tony Stark entered first, his arc reactor visible through his Black Sabbath t-shirt, followed by Captain America in tactical gear and Black Widow in her standard loadout. Thor's bulk filled the doorway behind them, his presence somehow making the reinforced room feel smaller. Tony's eyes went immediately to Master Chief, his internal HUD already scanning and failing to penetrate Mjolnir's. "Shielding. So that's a Spartan. Jarvis, you getting anything?" "Negative, sir. The armor is actively disrupting my scans. Energy shielding appears to be based on principles similar to the Chitauri technology, but significantly more refined." "Great. Mystery soldier from Mystery Dimension with mystery tech." Tony dropped into a chair and fixed Lasky with an appraising look. "Captain, I've seen your ship's specs. Those Mac guns could crack a continent if you wanted to. So let's skip the pleasantries and get to the important question. Are you refugees? Or are you a problem?" "We're survivors," Lasky said. "We didn't choose to come here. We want to repair our slip-space drive and find a way home. But that's going to take time, resources, and cooperation. We're willing to negotiate terms." Steve Rogers studied the holographic star charts, his tactical mind processing the scale of the conflict they described. Entire worlds glassed by plasma bombardment, fleet actions involving hundreds of ships, casualty numbers that made World War II look like a skirmish. "Captain, if what you're saying is true, you've been fighting something worse than anything we've faced. The Chitauri invasion lasted hours. Your war lasted decades." "The Chitauri?" Lasky pulled up another data file. "If you're referring to the 2012 New York incident, we intercepted communications traffic about it during our approach. Captain Rogers, with all respect, that was a probe. Maybe 10,000 ground troops and light air support. The Covenant deployed millions. Their smallest corvettes carried more firepower than your entire Air Force." Thor stepped forward, his expression grave. "I witnessed the New York battle from its first moment to its last. The Chitauri were numerous, but they were fodder. Expendable soldiers serving a master who commanded greater forces. You speak of fighting such numbers for 30 years? "And winning," John said quietly. "Barely. We lost reach in 2552, our primary military. Stronghold, 53 years of colonization, over 700 million dead in weeks. But we held Earth. We ended the war. Spartans don't lose." Natasha Romanoff had been silent until now, her green eyes cataloging every detail of John's body language, every micro-expression visible through his stance. "Spartans don't lose," she repeated. "That's what you tell yourselves. but you've lost plenty. Planets, fleets, soldiers. You just kept fighting anyway. John turned his helmet toward her, and for a moment the Black Widow met the faceless gaze of a weapon that had been fighting since she was in the Red Room. "We lost everything that mattered," he said. "We fought anyway. That's what Spartans do." Fury raised a hand before the tension could escalate. "Fascinating cultural exchange. But we've got practical problems. Captain Lasky, your ship is currently in low Earth orbit, violating every aerospace treaty humanity has signed. The World Security Council is demanding you land and submit to inspection. I've been holding them off for the last 3 hours, but my runway's running out." "We're not landing," Lasky said flatly. "Infinity stays in orbit with full operational capability. That's non-negotiable." "Then we've got a problem," Fury replied. "Because from where they're sitting, you're a heavily armed foreign power occupying our orbital space. They want you gone or grounded." "Director Fury?" Lasky leaned forward, his command presence filling the space between them. "Let me be very clear. Infinity carries 17,000 personnel, the most advanced military technology in UNSC inventory, and enough firepower to engage a Covenant fleet. We've been through hell to keep that ship flying. I will not ground her, I will not disarm her, and I will not put my people at the mercy of a government I don't know in a dimension I don't understand." Tony whistled low. "You know, I'm starting to like this guy." That's exactly what I would have said. "That's not helping, Stark," Steve said. But John noted the soldiers' biometric readings showed agreement. Captain America understood the position Lasky was in. Never surrender your defensive capability when surrounded by unknowns. Hill spoke up, her tablet displaying real-time news feeds. "Captain, you need to understand the political situation. The Battle of New York traumatized this world. We learned we're not alone in the universe, and we're not the biggest fish in the pond. Every government is scrambling to develop contingencies. The World Security Council has been pushing for weapons development, surveillance expansion, anything to prepare for the next invasion. Your ship appearing out of nowhere is either their worst nightmare or their greatest opportunity. Or both," Natasha added. "There are people in power who would kill for the technology on that ship. Others who would kill to prevent anyone from having it." John's motion tracker pinged. New contacts approaching the facility. 6 vehicles, heavy, armor, moving with military precision. His hand moved fractionally toward his sidearm before Fury spoke. "Relax, Chief. That's just the cavalry arriving. The Council insisted on sending observers." Fury's tone suggested he was no happier about it than the Spartans were. Through his helmet's enhanced optics, John zoomed in on the approaching convoy. Military hardware, professional formation, but the body language of the soldiers was wrong. Too rigid, too synchronized. These weren't regular troops. "Sir," he said to Lasky on a private channel, "something's off about the response team." Lasky's expression didn't change, but his hand moved to tap his datapad twice, the signal for elevated alert status. On Infinity, Spartans would be moving to combat positions. Palmer would be prepping rapid response teams. If this was a trap, they'd be ready. The conference room door opened again, and a man in an expensive suit entered, flanked by 4 soldiers in black tactical gear. The man's smile was practiced, political, and completely failed to reach his eyes. "Director Fury, Avengers, thank you for your service in containing the situation. I'm Alexander Pierce, World Security Council, and I'm here to ensure this first contact proceeds with appropriate oversight." John's threat assessment subroutines flagged Pierce immediately. The man's heartbeat was too steady, his micro-expressions too controlled. Either he was exactly what he claimed, a seasoned politician, or he was very good at hiding his true intentions. Behind Pierce, the tactical team's positioning was defensive, but with overlapping fields of fire. Professional, but aggressive. Fury's jaw tightened microscopically. Secretary Pierce. I wasn't aware the council was sending direct representation. Given the magnitude of this situation, direct involvement seemed prudent. Pierce turned to Lasky, extending his hand. Captain, on behalf of Earth's governments, welcome. I hope we can resolve this situation to everyone's satisfaction. Lasky stood and shook the offered hand, his expression diplomatic but guarded. Secretary, we appreciate the welcome. We're hoping for a peaceful resolution. As are we. Pierce gestured to the holographic display. Though I must say, the capabilities of your vessel are quite remarkable. The Council would very much like to discuss technology sharing, mutual defense pacts, perhaps even coordinated research initiatives. There it was, the real agenda. John watched Lasky's vitals spike minutely. Every government wanted Infinity's technology. Mac guns, energy shields, slip-space drives. The UNSC's military edge, earned through decades of desperate warfare. We're open to discussions, Lasky said carefully. But you need to understand, UNSC technology doctrine is classified. Sharing certain systems would require authorization from FleetCom, and we're currently unable to contact our chain of command. Of course, Pierce said smoothly. We wouldn't dream of pressuring you. Though I should mention, the Council is prepared to offer significant resources to aid in your repairs. Materials, facilities, scientific expertise. All we ask is transparency and cooperation. Tony's arc reactor pulsed brighter, his internal sensors detecting something in Pierce's tactical team's equipment that made his threat assessment spike. Jarvis, scan those guards' weapons. Sir, I'm detecting energy signatures inconsistent with standard shield armaments. The weapons appear to be modified with technology similar to... The lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in half a second later, bathing the room in red. John's shields flared as his armor systems went into combat mode, motion tracker expanding to full range. Pierce's tactical team was moving, weapons coming up with practiced speed. But they weren't aiming at the Spartans. They were aiming at the Avengers. Hail Hydra, Pierce said, his politician's mask dropping to reveal cold calculation. Beneath, then the shooting started. Master Chief moved before the first shot finished echoing off the conference room walls. His augmented reaction time, measured in milliseconds, turned the world into slow motion as his tactical assessment subroutines processed the threat. 4 hostiles targeting Avengers. Pierce moving for cover, Fury reaching for his sidearm, Hill already diving behind the conference table. John's right hand blurred to his magnum, drawing and firing in one fluid motion. The M6A2 barked once, a thunderous report in the confined space, and the nearest Hydra operative's weapon exploded in his hands as the armor-piercing round shredded through the modified energy rifle. The operative stumbled back, and John was already moving, closing the distance in 2 powered strides. His left arm came up, Mjolnir's enhanced strength behind it, and caught the second operative's weapon mid-swing. The rifle's stock shattered against his armored forearm. John reversed his grip, drove his elbow into the man's solar plexus with enough force to lift him off his feet, and hurled him into the third operative. Total elapsed time, 2.3 seconds. Steve Rogers had his shield up, the vibranium disc intercepting a burst of energy fire that would have taken Tony's head off. Hydra! Pierce, you son of a... He hurled the shield in a calculated arc that took out 2 overhead lights and ricocheted into the 4th operative's chest plate, sending him crashing through a chair. Thor's hammer was already in his hand, Mjolnir responding to his rage. Treachery! Lightning crackled across his armor as he moved toward Pierce. But Natasha was faster, her hands blurring through a combat sequence that put Pierce in a joint lock before the secretary could reach whatever panic button he'd been going for. "Stand down!" Fury's voice cut through the chaos, his weapon trained on the downed operatives. "Nobody moves until..." The wall exploded, not metaphorically. The reinforced concrete and steel structure designed to contain superhuman conflicts disintegrated as something massive punched through from outside. Dust and debris filled the air, John's visor compensating instantly with VISR mode, thermal overlays painting the chaos in clear digital precision. Through the hole stepped something John recognized immediately from UNSC intelligence files captured during the war. A Sangheli, an elite in common parlance. 8 feet of reptilian muscle wrapped in matte black combat armor, energy shields shimmering around its form. But this wasn't standard Covenant gear. The armor was modified, incorporating technology John didn't recognize, and the elite's mandibles were spread in what passed for a predator's smile. "Demon," the Sangheli growled in perfect, accented English. "The slip-space rupture brought you here, and it brought us the gift of your location. The servants of the abiding truth do not forget. The war is not over." John's threat assessment spiked to critical. Covenant remnants had followed them through the dimensional rift, and they'd already learned to speak this Earth's primary language, which meant they'd been here longer than anyone realized, studying, preparing. "Contact!" John's voice boomed through the facility-wide comm. "Covenant forces, Site Gamma 7, all Spartans, weapons free." The elite's energy sword ignited with a characteristic snap hiss, twin blades of superheated plasma extending from the hilt. It lunged with speed that would have seemed impossible for something its size, the sword arcing toward Thor with lethal intent. Thor brought Mjolnir up to block, hammer meeting plasma blade in a collision that sent out a shockwave of force and light. The elite's mandibles spread wider in surprise as its weapon, designed to cut through UNSC titanium like tissue paper, met something that wouldn't yield. "Impressive blade, creature," Thor said, lightning beginning to arc across his form. "But I am Thor Odinson, and you have made a grave error attacking in my presence." He swung Mjolnir in a devastating arc. The elite's shields flared brilliant purple, absorbing the impact. But the sheer kinetic force sent the alien warrior sliding backward across the ruined floor. Its hooves found purchase, and it let out a roaring challenge that was answered by multiple voices outside. More elites were coming. John activated his comm to Infinity. "Lasky, we have Covenant contact. Multiple Sangheli, Site Gamma 7. Unknown how many made it through the rift. Requesting immediate extraction and fire support." "Copy that, Chief." Palmer's voice came through, sharp with controlled aggression. "Pelicans are inbound. ETA 3 minutes. I've got Spartans deploying to your location. Infinity's sensors are picking up multiple energy signatures converging on your position. Chief, we're reading at least 20 hostiles. 20 elites. Even for Spartans, those were serious odds. For normal humans, they were a death sentence. Tony's repulsors were already charging, his HUD painting targets through the dust and debris. "Jarvis, what am I looking at?" "Unknown hostile species, sir. 8 feet tall, energy shielding technology significantly more advanced than the Chitauri. Recommend extreme caution." "Yeah, I'm getting that vibe." Tony fired. Twin repulsor beams lancing through the hole in the wall and catching an approaching elite center mass. The alien's shields flared and held, absorbing the energy before flickering out. The elite staggered but didn't fall, raising what looked like a rifle built for someone twice human size. The plasma bolts that came back were superheated slugs of ionized gas, tracking toward Tony with alarming accuracy. He jinked left, his armor's mobility saving him as the plasma scored black marks across the wall where he'd been floating. "Okay, they've got teeth." Tony muttered, recalibrating his weapons for shield penetration. Cap, these things have energy shields. We need sustained fire to drop them. Steve was already moving, shield up, processing this new threat with the tactical mind that had won wars. Aliens. Real aliens. Not Chitauri shock troops, but warriors in powered armor who moved like they'd been fighting for generations. Avengers. We hold this position until evacuation. Hill, get the wounded out. Fury, already on it. Fury had his phone out, calling in every shield asset in range. We've got Hydra sleeper agents and alien invasion happening simultaneously. This day just keeps getting better. Natasha had Pierce secured, the secretary's face pressed against the floor. This was planned. Hydra knew they were coming. Pierce laughed, the sound ugly. Hydra adapts. When we detected the dimensional breach, we knew opportunity had arrived. The Covenant wants revenge on your Spartans. We want your technology. Everyone gets what they need. John processed that in the fraction of a second it took him to reload. Hydra had made contact with the Covenant remnants, brokered some kind of deal. Technology sharing, mutual benefit, all built on betrayal. It was the same pattern he'd seen during the war, insurrectionists making deals with the Covenant, thinking they could control the zealots. They'd all died screaming. Thor, Steve, these things are fast, strong, and their shields can take sustained fire. John moved toward the breach, his assault rifle coming up. Aim for the neck joint where the shields are weakest, or wait for their shields to drop and hit them hard. Don't let them get close. Those energy swords will cut through almost anything. Almost? Steve asked, his shield intercepting another plasma bolt. Mjolnir armor can take a few hits. Your shield's vibranium should hold. Everything else, assume it's going through. Another elite vaulted through the breach, this one carrying a fuel rod cannon, a weapon designed to take out vehicles. It fired, and the conference room's reinforced table disintegrated in a blast of radioactive green fire. Hill barely rolled, clear, her jacket smoking. John's motion tracker lit up like a Christmas tree. More contacts, coming from multiple vectors. The Covenant hadn't just followed them. They'd positioned forces around the facility before springing the trap. This was a coordinated assault. The Sangheili John had disarmed earlier was rising, reaching for a plasma pistol on his belt. John pivoted, his boot coming up in a kick that would have killed an unarmored human. The operative's ribs shattered, and he went down hard. No hesitation, no mercy. These weren't prisoners of war. They'd forfeited that when they'd allied with humanity's genocidal enemy. Outside, the roar of Pelican engines cut through the sound of combat. Spartan Thorne's voice came through the tactical channel. Chief, we're taking fire on approach. Multiple bogies with aircraft-grade weapons. Through the breach, John could see them. Banshees, the Covenant's standard ground support fighter, their distinctive curves painted in the crimson, colors of the servants of the abiding truth. They swooped and dove with alien grace, plasma cannons spitting fire at the incoming Pelicans. One dropship took a direct hit, its shields flaring brilliant blue before failing. The pilot, a Marine John had served with on Requiem, fought to control the spin, but a second volley punched through the cockpit. The Pelican augured in, impacting the tree line 200 meters away in a fireball that lit up the mountainside. Damn it. Palmer's voice was raw with fury. All units, weapons free. Chief, we're calling in longswords for air superiority. Hold position. But holding was becoming impossible. The elites were pushing in from multiple angles, their energy shields shrugging off small arms fire. One kicked through what remained of the wall, dual plasma rifles blazing, forcing everyone into cover. John's shields took 2 hits, dropping to 60%. He returned fire with controlled bursts, his rounds finding the weak points in elite. Armor, neck joints, abdomen seals, the vulnerable point where the helmet met the collar. One Sangheili went down with purple blood spraying from its throat. But for every one that fell, 2 more appeared. Lasky's voice cut through the chaos. "Chief, Infinity's sensors are painting more targets. We're tracking at least 40 Covenant signatures in the mountains around your position, and they're moving to encircle you. Whatever they followed us here for, they're committing everything." 40 elites. John had faced worse odds. Installation 04, the Battle of Reach. Dozens of engagements where survival seemed impossible. But this time, he wasn't alone with other Spartans who understood how to fight Covenant tactics. The Avengers were skilled, powerful even, but they'd never faced an enemy like this. Thor's hammer struck another elite, the impact cracking shields and armor alike, sending the warrior flying through the air to crash into a parked vehicle. The Asgardian was holding his own, his divine strength evening the odds. But even he was taking hits. A plasma bolt scored across his shoulder, burning through cloth and searing divine flesh. "These warriors are formidable," Thor called out, breathing hard. "But they bleed." "Everything bleeds," John replied, dropping another elite with a 3-round burst to the chest after its shields failed. "The question is whether we can make them bleed out before they overwhelm us." Steve's shield ricocheted between 3 elites in perfect geometry, disrupting their formation. "We need a plan, Chief. We can't hold this position indefinitely." John's tactical computer was already running scenarios. Site Gamma 7 was designed as a defensive position, but against an enemy with air support and numerical superiority, it was a kill box. They needed to extract, regroup, and establish a defensive perimeter that could hold against sustained assault. But that meant reaching the extraction point through 40 Covenant warriors, with allies who'd never fought this kind of war. John checked his ammunition. 3 magazines left for the assault rifle, 2 for the Magnum. His shields were recharging, armor integrity at 97%. He'd been in worse situations, not by much, but worse. "New plan," John said, his voice cutting through the tactical channel with the authority of someone who'd made the impossible routine. "We fight our way to the extraction point. Standard Covenant engagement protocol, focused fire to drop shields, then kill shots. Stay mobile, use cover, don't let them pin you down." "And if they try to pin us down?" Natasha asked, her widow's bites crackling with electricity as she dropped a Hydra operative trying to crawl for a weapon. John's response was simple, delivered with the flat certainty of a Spartan who'd never learned to lose. "Then we go through them." The explosion of a fuel rod cannon round turned the western wall of Site Gamma 7 into molten slag. John's shields absorbed the thermal bloom, dropping to 30% as he rolled behind an overturned security station. His motion tracker showed the tactical situation deteriorating, red hostile markers flooding in from 3 sides, with only the eastern approach still clear. That's where the Pelicans would try to land, if they could survive the Banshees. "Fire Team Majestic report." Palmer's voice crackled through the comm, tense with controlled aggression. "We're pinned down south of the facility," Spartan Thorn responded, the staccato crack of DMR fire punctuating his words. 6 elites with active camo, standard hunter-killer tactics. Madsen took a plasma bolt to the shoulder, armor held, but she's at 40%. "We're working our way to you, but it's slow going." John processed that. Fire Team Majestic, 4 Spartan 4s, excellent soldiers, but without the decades of Covenant combat experience the IIs carried. Against 6 stealth elites, they'd be fighting for every meter. "Copy that. Continue your advance, but don't get bogged down. We're moving to Extraction Point Delta." John switched to the Avengers channel. "Thor, I need you to clear the landing zone. Those Banshees will shred our dropships if they maintain air superiority." Thor grinned, blood, his own surprisingly, trailing from a cut above his eye where an energy sword had come closer than it should have. Finally, a task worthy of the god of thunder. He spun Mjolnir and launched skyward, lightning trailing behind him as he rocketed toward the alien aircraft. A Banshee pilot barely had time to register the incoming Asgardian before Thor's hammer caved in the fighter's prow, the impact sending the craft spinning out of control into the mountainside. Thor didn't slow, lightning arcing from his hands to engulf a second Banshee, the electrical discharge overwhelming its systems and sending it plummeting. Your flying machinations are no match for Asgard's might. Thor's voice boomed across the battlefield, audible even over the weapons fire. Tony streaked after him, repulsors blazing. Jarvis, analyze those aircraft. I want weak points. Sir, the craft appeared to use anti-gravity propulsion with minimal armor plating. The pilot section and the fuel cells located in the aft section are vulnerable to sustained fire. That I can work with. Tony's targeting systems locked onto a diving Banshee, and his micro-missiles streaked out in a swarm. The explosions tore through the fighter's wing, sending it into an uncontrolled spin. Okay, alien Air Force isn't so tough. How are we doing on the ground? Not great, Steve called back, his shield deflecting a plasma bolt that would have taken Natasha's head off. We're surrounded, and these things keep coming. John was already moving, his assault rifle barking in controlled bursts as he advanced toward the eastern extraction point. An elite charged him, energy sword raised, moving with the speed and grace that had made Sangheili feared across the galaxy. John didn't try to dodge. His armor's shields were designed for exactly this. The sword struck his shields in a shower of sparks and energy discharge. John's shields collapsed completely, but the blow had been deflected enough to miss his armor. He was inside the elite's guard now, too close for the sword to be effective. His armored fist drove into the warrior's abdomen with 800 pounds of force behind it, the impact actually lifting the elite off its hooves. Before it could recover, John's magnum came up point blank against its throat and fired twice. Purple blood sprayed as the elite went down. Shields recharging, his armor's AI announced. The percentage counter in his HUD began climbing from 0. Fury was falling back in good order, his sidearm cracking as he provided covering fire for Hill, who was helping a wounded SHIELD agent toward the extraction point. Chief, I'm starting to see why you people survived 30 years of this. The key is not dying, John replied, dropping another elite with a headshot as its shields failed. His tactical display updated. Pelican inbound, 30 seconds to landing. But the Covenant knew it too, and they were concentrating forces on the LZ. Captain Rogers, I need you to break their formation. They're massing for a push. Steve didn't hesitate. He'd fought in World War II, faced down Hydra and Red Skull, survived 70 years on ice, and come out fighting. These aliens were just another enemy, and he'd learned long ago how to turn determination into victory. Avengers, wedge formation on me. He charged, shield raised, and incredibly, impossibly, the elite's disciplined advance faltered. Not because Steve Rogers was superhuman. The Covenant had faced Spartans before, but because Captain America carried something the elites, despite their warrior culture, had never encountered. The EOM, absolute refusal to surrender that came from fighting for an ideal rather than glory. His shield struck the lead elite's energy shields with enough force to crack them, and Steve followed through with a spinning kick that sent a second warrior stumbling. Natasha was beside him instantly, her widow's bites finding the weak points in elite armor that John had identified, electric shocks disrupting shields and nervous systems. Now, John called, and the surviving SHIELD agents and Hydra prisoners, because John wasn't leaving anyone to the Covenant's mercy, even traitors, broke for the extraction point in a coordinated rush. The Pelican roared in, its door guns blazing, 70mm autocannons chewing through elite shields with sustained fire. Spartan Grant was manning one gun, his armor's targeting system painting hostiles faster than the human crew could track. Purple blood and shattered armor marked where the high-explosive rounds found their targets. "Get to the bird," Grant's voice boomed. "We can't hold this LZ long." An elite zealot, identified by the golden armor that marked field commanders, emerged from the tree line with an energy sword in each hand. This one was bigger than the others, its movements carrying the absolute confidence of a warrior who'd survived hundreds of battles. It assessed the tactical situation in a glance and began barking orders in Sangheili, its voice a guttural mix of clicks and roars. The Covenant forces shifted immediately, their assault becoming coordinated, disciplined. Two elites moved to flank, another pair provided suppressing fire, while the zealot itself charged toward the Pelican with terrifying speed. John intercepted it. The zealot's dual swords came up in a guard position as it registered the gold visor helmet, the green Mjolnir armor. "Demon," it snarled, mandibles spreading wide. "I am Voro Lazal, blade of the prophet's will. Your death will restore honor to..." John shot it in the face. The magnum round struck the Chu-NM zealot's shields, which flared and held barely. The elite warrior's head snapped back from the impact, and for a fraction of a second, its carefully planned speech was forgotten in favor of pure survival instinct. "I don't care," John said flatly, and fired again. This time the shields failed, and the round caught the zealot in its right mandible, purple blood exploding from the wound. Voro Lazal roared in pain and fury, both energy swords coming around in arcs designed to overwhelm John's defenses through sheer speed and ferocity. John's shields were at 62%, enough. The first sword struck his left pauldron, energy discharge lighting up the contact point, but the shield holding. John twisted inside the second strike, his enhanced reflexes turning the world into slow-motion clarity, and drove his armored elbow into the zealot's sword arm. The elite's bone cracked audibly, the sword deactivated, falling from nerveless fingers. But Lazal was a zealot for a reason. Its left hand still held a blade, and it was already adapting, dropping low and sweeping the sword at John's legs in a move that would have bisected an unarmored human. John jumped, his armor's servos boosting him 3 feet into the air, and came down with both boots on the zealot's back. 800 pounds of Spartan and armor drove the elite face first into the ground with enough force to crater the earth. Before it could recover, John's magnum was pressed against the back of its skull. "For reach," John said quietly, and pulled the trigger. The other elites saw their commander fall, and something shifted in their assault. They didn't retreat. Sangheili warriors considered that dishonorable, but their coordination fractured. Some charged in rage, others held position, and the wedge formation that had been pushing the defenders back collapsed into individual duels. "Now!" Palmer's voice cut through the chaos as 2 more pelicans roared in from different vectors, their door guns adding to the firestorm. "All personnel, extract now." Steve was the last one moving toward the pelicans, his shield deflecting fire as he covered the retreat. An elite lunged at him with an energy pike, the weapon's reach giving it an advantage. Steve blocked the first thrust, redirected the second, but the third slipped past his guard and struck his shoulder. The pike's energy field discharged against his supersoldier physiology, burning through his tactical uniform and searing flesh. Steve grunted in pain, but didn't fall, his free hand snapping out to grab the pike's shaft. He yanked hard, pulling the elite off balance, and his shield came around in a devastating arc that caught the warrior across its helmet. The elite went down, and Steve was moving again, pain forgotten in the discipline of completing the mission. Tony dropped from the sky beside him, repulsors flaring. "Cap, you're hit. I'm mobile, get to the dropship." "Stubborn even when you're bleeding. I can respect that." Tony's targeting system painted the remaining elites, and his repulsors cut loose in coordinated strikes that dropped shields across the battlefield. "Thor, we're extracting." Thor descended in a corona of lightning, his hammer having reduced 3 more banshees to flaming wreckage. His armor was scorched, his face bloodied, but his eyes blazed with the joy of battle. "These warriors fight with honor, even in service of treachery. I shall remember this day." "Great. Write it in your diary later," Tony said, grabbing Thor's arm and boosting them both toward the nearest Pelican. "Right now, we're leaving." John was the last aboard, his rifle tracking targets until the Pelican's ramp began to close. Through the gap, he saw the Covenant forces regrouping, preparing for another assault. But the dropship was already climbing, its engines screaming as the pilot pushed for maximum velocity. "All birds away," Palmer reported. "Chief, we've got casualties, but everyone's alive. Fire team, Majestic made it to their extraction point. We're RTB to Infinity." John maglocked his rifle and moved through the Pelican's troop bay, his medical training assessing injuries with practiced efficiency. Steve's shoulder wound was serious, but not life-threatening. Several SHIELD agents had plasma burns. Hill had a gash across her forehead. Fury was already on his phone, probably calling in more assets. And Pierce sat in restraints, his expression unreadable. "Hydra and the Covenant," Natasha said, her voice cold as she studied the secretary. "That's a combination I didn't see coming." "You see what you're prepared to see," Pierce replied. SHIELD thought they were preparing for the next Chitauri invasion. Hydra knew the real threats would come from elsewhere. "When we detected the Covenant scout ships 3 days ago, we knew opportunity had arrived." John's head snapped toward Pierce. 3 days? They've been in this dimension for 3 days? Long enough to make contact. Long enough to negotiate. They want revenge on the UNSC for ending their holy war. We want your technology to create the weapons necessary for Hydra's new world order. It's a simple transaction. You made a deal with genocidal zealots, Steve said, his voice carrying the weight of profound disappointment. Pierce, I fought in a war against people who thought they could control evil for the greater good. It never ends well. History is written by the victors, Captain. You should know that. The Pelican shuddered as it climbed above the facility. Through the viewport, John could see the Covenant forces below, more than the 40 they'd estimated. Easily 60 warriors, with more dropships landing in the distance. This wasn't a raid. This was the vanguard of an invasion force. Lasky, we have a problem, John said over the command channel. The Covenant isn't just here for revenge. They're establishing a beachhead. If Hydra gave them intelligence on this Earth's defensive capabilities, then they know this world is vulnerable. Lasky finished. Unlike our Earth, you haven't spent 30 years building orbital defense platforms and fleet assets. One Covenant cruiser could glass a city before your Air Force could respond. Tony's helmet retracted, his expression serious as Jarvis fed him sensor data. Chief, how many ships did the Covenant have when they attacked your Earth? At Reach, over 300 capital ships. At Earth, less, maybe 24 that made it through the orbital platforms. But it was enough to devastate our defenses. And how many ships does this Earth have in orbit? Thor asked. John met the Asgardian's eyes. From what I've seen, a couple space stations, some satellites, maybe some experimental craft. Nothing that could stop a Covenant cruiser. The silence that followed was broken by Fury's voice, unusually grim. We need to brief the World Security Council. If what you're saying is true. It's worse than true, John interrupted. If the servants of the abiding truth followed us through that dimensional rift, they did it for a reason. They're not just hunting Spartans, they're looking for something. Looking for what? Natasha asked. John's mind raced through the intelligence files, the battles on Forerunner installations, the pattern of Covenant religious obsession. Forerunner artifacts, the same precursor technology that nearly destroyed both our civilizations. If there are Forerunner installations in this dimension, then we're not just facing an invasion. Lasky's voice cut in, sharp with realization. We're facing a holy war, and this Earth has no idea what's coming. The Pelican banked hard, climbing toward Infinity's hangar bay. Behind them, the Catskill Mountains burned where Covenant and Hydra forces consolidated their position. The first battle had been fought, first blood drawn on both sides. But as John watched the alien forces below through the viewport, he knew with absolute certainty that this was just the beginning. The Covenant hadn't crossed dimensions for a simple raid. They'd found something here, something worth committing forces for. And Master Chief had 30 years of experience that said when the Covenant wanted something badly enough, they'd burn worlds to get it. Infinity's hangar bay was controlled chaos. Pelicans touched down in coordinated patterns, while deck crews swarmed each craft, performing rapid damage assessments and crew extractions. Medical teams stood ready with gurneys, their UNSC training evident in the efficiency with which they triaged wounded. Spartan fees in full armor formed security perimeters around the Avengers as they disembarked, weapons held ready but not aimed. Professional courtesy balanced against tactical caution. John stepped off the ramp and immediately accessed the tactical network. His HUD populated with status updates. Infinity shields at 87% and climbing. MAC guns charged and tracking multiple ground contacts. Longsword interceptors on combat air patrol around the ship. And most critically, long-range sensors painting a disturbing picture of Covenant activity across the northeastern United States. Captain Lasky met him at the base of the ramp, his expression grim. "Chief, we've got a developing situation. Infinity's sensors are detecting slip-space ruptures, small ones, nothing like what brought us here, but they're appearing in a pattern across this planet's surface." "Phantom dropships," John said immediately, recognizing the signature. "The Covenant is deploying ground forces through short-range slip-space jumps. How many contacts?" 17 confirmed landing sites. Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico. They're hitting remote areas in the Western Territories. Minimal population, lots of wilderness, and... Lasky pulled up a holographic map that made John's blood run cold. "Chief, look at the pattern." The landing sites formed a geometric progression, each point marking a location that corresponded to... John's tactical computer ran the analysis faster than conscious thought. They're searching for something. Standard Covenant archaeological survey pattern. They use the same formation when hunting for Forerunner artifacts on Sigma Octanus 4. Steve Rogers approached, his wounded shoulder already bandaged by Infinity's medical team. His supersoldier healing would handle the rest, but the burn was visible even through the dressing. "You're saying these Covenant forces are looking for ancient alien technology? On our Earth?" "Not just looking, they already know it's here." John zoomed in on the map, his mind processing 3 decades of Covenant tactical doctrine. This isn't an exploratory pattern. This is a recovery operation. They know what they're searching for and approximately where to find it. Tony Stark was scanning everything with barely concealed fascination, his armor's sensors cataloging Infinity's technology even as Jarvis struggled to penetrate UNSC security protocols. "Okay, I'm officially lost. Ancient aliens left artifacts on Earth in this dimension? That's... Actually, given the week I've had, that's not even top 5 craziest things." Thor stepped forward, his expression troubled. "There are old places on Midgard. places even Asgard does not speak of openly. Sites where the barriers between realms grow thin, where powers from before the 9 realms held sway. If your Forerunners were similar to those ancient forces, the Forerunners were a civilization that existed over 100,000 years ago, John explained, pulling up technical readouts. They built installations across the galaxy, weapons, ships, entire artificial worlds. Their technology is so advanced, it appears almost magical. But it operates on principles of hard science we barely understand. And they seeded life across countless worlds, including Earth, Lasky added. In our dimension, Forerunner artifacts have been found on Earth. Installation Zero's portal in Africa, various sites that Oni keeps classified. If this dimension's Earth was also part of Forerunner space, there could be installations here too. Natasha had been silent, processing, her spy's mind working through implications. And the Covenant worship this Forerunner technology as religious artifacts. So from their perspective, they've found a virgin Earth full of holy sites that nobody's defending. Worse, John said. The servants of the abiding truth are fundamentalists. They believe the Covenant's fall was divine punishment for abandoning the true path. If they think this Earth contains Forerunner secrets that could restore their holy mission, they'll commit everything they have. Fury had been listening while simultaneously coordinating with S.H.I.E.L.D. through his phone, his expression growing darker with each update. I'm getting reports from multiple federal agencies. Strange sightings in national parks, hikers reporting unusual aircraft. Even some Native American reservations reporting intrusions. And that was before your aliens started landing dropships. They've been here for 3 days, Palmer said, joining the group. Her armor showed scorch marks from the battle, but she moved with undiminished intensity. 3 days to scout, identify targets, and position forces. Chief, if they brought enough warriors through that dimensional rift, they could establish permanent occupation of key sites before this world's governments can coordinate a response, John finished. He turned to Fury. Director, what's your planet's military response capability? Combined air power, ground forces, response time to remote locations? Fury's eye narrowed. Depends on the location and political complications. We could mobilize military assets within hours for domestic territory. But if we're talking about multiple simultaneous incursions across international borders... He paused, running calculations. It would be a logistical nightmare. And that's assuming the World Security Council doesn't spend 3 days arguing about jurisdiction while aliens dig up whatever they're looking for. Then we're already behind the operational timeline, Lasky said. Captain Rogers, in your military experience, how would this world's forces fare against Covenant infantry? Steve's jaw tightened as he considered. He'd seen what the elites could do, their speed, their shields, their weapons that turned cover into molten slag. Conventional forces, they'd take heavy casualties. These aliens are faster and better equipped than anything we faced in World War II. Without specialized training and weapons. He met John's visor. How did your people fight them? Carefully, John replied. And with massive casualties until we developed doctrine and equipment. The UNSC learned to counter Covenant technology over 3 decades of warfare. Your world doesn't have 3 decades. Tony's arc reactor pulsed as his mind raced through technical specifications. But you have that knowledge. You've fought these things for 30 years. You know their tactics, their weaknesses, their technology. That's got to count for something. It counts for survival, John said. Which is why we need to act now, before they establish fortified positions around whatever Forerunner sites they've identified. We. Fury's tone carried weight. Chief, I appreciate the tactical situation, but let's be clear about what you're proposing. You're talking about UNSC military intervention on Earth soil, potentially across multiple nations, against an alien force that's technically not invading us. They're invading to find artifacts. Director Fury, with respect, that distinction won't matter when they activate whatever Forerunner technology they find, Lasky said, his command presence filling the space. We've seen what happens when Covenant zealots gain access to Forerunner installations. At best, they'll weaponize it. At worst. He pulled up classified files, images of Installation 04's destruction, of High Charity's fall. They could accidentally trigger systems designed to sterilize galactic sectors. The holographic images spoke for themselves. Ring worlds thousands of kilometers across, biological weapons that could eliminate all sentient life, AI constructs with the power to unmake reality. The Avengers stared at the evidence of a technological gulf that made even Asgard's achievements seem modest. By Odin's beard, Thor breathed. These Forerunners commanded powers that rival the Infinity Stones themselves. And the Covenant will do anything to possess that power, John said. They've already allied with Hydra, which means they're learning about this Earth's capabilities and weaknesses. Every hour we wait, they dig in deeper. Alexander Pierce, still in restraints but listening to everything, laughed bitterly. You're all missing the obvious solution. The Covenant wants Forerunner artifacts. Hydra wants UNSC technology. Give them what they want, negotiate terms, and avoid a war this world isn't ready to fight. Steve's hand clenched into a fist. That's the same logic that let the Nazis rise to power. Appeasement doesn't work when the enemy's goal is domination. The enemy's goal is survival of their religious ideology. Pierce countered. That's not the same as conquest. Let them take their artifacts and leave. You don't understand Covenant doctrine, John said, his voice carrying the weight of decades fighting that doctrine. They don't just take artifacts and leave. They claim entire worlds as holy ground. They glass planets to purify them. If we let them establish themselves here, this Earth becomes another harvest, another reach. A protracted conflict that ends in billions dead. The tactical display updated with new contacts. More slip-space signatures, these ones larger. Lasky's expression shifted from concerned to alarmed. Chief, we're detecting a major rupture forming in orbit. Something big is coming through. John was already moving toward the observation deck, the Avengers following. Through Infinity's reinforced viewports, space itself was tearing open. A wound in reality that dwarfed the rupture that had brought the UNSC warship through. Purple and blue energy crackled across the dimensional barrier as something massive began to push through. The prow emerged first, sleek, organic lines that looked grown rather than built, covered in the purple-blue armor that marked Covenant capital ships. Then the body followed, 2 kilometers of warship that made even Infinity look modest. A CCS-class battlecruiser, the backbone of the Covenant fleet, complete with lateral plasma torpedo launchers and energy projectors that could glass continents. That's impossible, Palmer whispered. That ship is too large for the dimensional rift. It shouldn't fit through. Unless someone widened the rift from this side, Natasha said, her spy's instincts connecting dots. Hydra. They've been working with the Covenant for 3 days. Long enough to sabotage dimensional barriers, create a gateway large enough for capital ships. Tony's face had gone pale behind his faceplate as Jarvis fed him analysis. That thing's energy output is reading in the petawatt range. Its main weapons could level Manhattan in minutes. The Covenant cruiser hung in space like a predator, its position geostationary above North America. Then, its communications array pulsed, and a transmission broadcast across all frequencies. Military, civilian, emergency services. The voice that spoke was deep, resonant, carrying the absolute certainty of religious conviction. "Humans of this realm," the Sangheli commander began, speaking perfect English with an accent that suggested intensive study. "I am Shipmaster Urtas Vadum, and I bring you truth. This world harbors sacred artifacts of the Forerunners, the gods who created all life. You do not deserve such holy relics. You do not possess the wisdom to wield them. Therefore, we of the servants of the abiding truth shall claim what is rightfully ours." Fury's phone exploded with incoming calls. The President, the Joint Chiefs, the World Security Council, every intelligence agency on the planet demanding answers. "You have witnessed the power of the demon's vessel," Urtas continued, and John felt every eye in the hangar turn toward him. "The UNSC Infinity is mighty, a tribute to humanity's capacity for war. But it is one ship. We have more. Surrender the sacred sites, allow us to complete our divine mission, and your world will be spared. Resist, and we shall demonstrate why the Covenant dominated the galaxy for 3,000 years." The transmission ended. The cruiser's weapon systems came online, visible even from Infinity's position as energy began gathering in its lateral plasma launchers. Not targeting anything specific, just a demonstration of capability. "Sir," the tactical officer reported to Lasky, "that cruiser's shields are at full strength. Its weapons are charged, and we're detecting 2 more slipspace signatures forming. More ships are coming through." Lasky's jaw was set, his hands gripping the command console. John recognized that look, the expression of a commander who knew he was outgunned but refused to surrender. "Battle stations, charge Mac guns, launch all longswords. If those ships move against civilian targets, we engage." "Captain," Fury said carefully, "if you start a shooting war in Earth orbit, there'll be no walking it back. You'll be committing the UNSC to defend a world that isn't even yours." Lasky turned to face the SHIELD director. And in that moment, John saw not just a captain, but a man who'd watched Reach burn, who'd stood on Earth's surface when the Covenant Armada arrived, who'd made the choice to keep fighting even when victory seemed impossible. "Director Fury, 17,000 UNSC personnel aboard this ship swore an oath to protect humanity. It didn't specify which dimension's humanity. If you think I'm going to sit in orbit and watch the Covenant glass cities because of a technicality, you don't know the UNSC." John felt something he rarely experienced, a surge of pride for the organization that had created him, broken him, and forged him into a weapon. The UNSC had done terrible things in the name of survival. But when it mattered, when the moment came to stand or run, they always stood. Steve Rogers stepped forward, his wounded shoulder forgotten, and extended his hand to Lasky. "Captain, on behalf of the Avengers, we'll stand with you, if you'll teach us how to fight your war." Lasky shook the hand. "Welcome to the eternal struggle, Captain. First lesson: when the Covenant shows up with cruisers, you hit them before they deploy more troops." "Agreed," Tony said, his faceplate snapping down. "Jarvis, I need targeting solutions for that cruiser's shield generators. Also call Rhodey. We're going to need War Machine for this. And get me the President. If we're starting an intergalactic war, he should probably know." Thor raised Mjolnir, lightning already crackling across his form. "I have fought invaders before. I shall do so again. These Covenant shall learn that Midgard is under Asgard's protection." Natasha was already checking her weapons, her expression cold and focused. "So we're really doing this, taking on an alien empire." "Not an empire," John corrected. "A remnant. Zealots who refused to accept their war was over. They're dangerous, but they're not the full Covenant fleet." He turned to Lasky. "Sir, I'm taking a team to the nearest Forerunner site. If we can secure it before the Covenant ground forces arrive, we deny them their objective." "Agreed. Take Fire Team Osiris and whoever from the Avengers wants to volunteer. Palmer, prepare a tactical assault package. Full combat load, enough firepower to hold against a Covenant lance." Palmer grinned, the expression predatory. "Finally, some real action. Chief, I'm coming with you. You get all the fun fights." "Commander, the ship has 400 other Spartans. You're going into a Forerunner installation with unknown hostiles. You need backup who knows Covenant tactics." She turned to the Avengers. "Fair warning, fighting the Covenant isn't like fighting Chitauri. These aliens are smart, trained, and they've been waging war since before your grandparents were born. Stay close, follow Chief's lead, and maybe you'll survive." Steve smiled grimly. "Commander, I've been getting those warnings since 1943. Let's move." As the teams assembled and Infinity's crew prepared for fleet action, John accessed the long-range sensors one more time. The Covenant cruiser hung in orbit like a sword over Earth's head, and 2 more slip-space rifts were opening. The enemy had made their move. Now it was humanity's turn to respond. And Master Chief had learned long ago that when the Covenant thought they had won, that's when Spartans hit hardest. The Pelican cut through Earth's atmosphere at maximum velocity, its hull glowing from atmospheric friction as the pilot pushed the dropship beyond standard operational parameters. Inside the troop bay, Master Chief ran final equipment checks, while his HUD displayed the tactical situation in real-time updates that grew worse by the minute. 2 more Covenant cruisers had emerged from the dimensional rift, forming a triangle formation above North America that gave them overlapping fields of fire across the entire continent. Infinity held position in high orbit, her MAC guns trained on the nearest cruiser but holding fire. 1 ship against 3 was survivable, barely, but opening fire would trigger a fleet engagement that could devastate the planet below. The standoff held because neither side wanted to fire first. Yet. "Approaching target site," the pilot announced. "Kodiak Mountains, Montana. Population 0 for 50 clicks in any direction. Perfect place for ancient alien ruins, apparently." John studied the tactical map. The Forerunner installation, designated Site Alpha by UNSC Reconnaissance, sat in a valley surrounded by peaks that would make conventional military deployment difficult. Covenant forces had already landed 2 Phantoms worth of troops. 16 elites, estimate 4 grunts for support, possible Jackal snipers in the ridgelines. Against that, John had Fire Team Osiris, 4 Spartan fours led by Jameson Locke, Commander Palmer, and 3 Avengers who'd insisted on coming. Steve Rogers sat across from him, checking the UNSC assault rifle Palmer had issued him with the careful attention of a soldier who understood that unfamiliar weapons could get you killed. The MA-5D was heavier than M4s he'd trained with in the 1940s, but the principles were similar. Point, shoot, don't run out of ammunition at the wrong time. Tony Stark floated in his armor near the Pelican's rear ramp, running diagnostics. His arc reactor pulsed steadily, and Jarvis had spent the flight analyzing every scrap of Covenant technology data the UNSC would share. "Chief, I've been thinking about those energy shields. If I can recalibrate my repulsors to the same frequency." "Don't," John said flatly. "Covenant shields adapt to repeated energy signatures. Hit them with the same frequency twice, and the 3rd time does nothing. Vary your output or use kinetic weapons." "Kinetic, right. Old school." Tony's faceplate concealed his expression, but his tone carried grudging respect. "You know, in my dimension, I'm usually the one giving tactical advice. In my dimension, I spent 30 years learning how to kill things that thought they were invincible," John replied. "The Covenant aren't invincible. They're just very, very good at war. Thor stood near the troop bay entrance, Mjolnir held loosely in one hand. Unlike the others, he needed no equipment check. His hammer, his armor, and his Asgardian physiology were all the preparation he required. Master, Chief, these elites fought with honor at the shield facility. They did not flee when their leader fell, nor did they beg for mercy. Such warriors earn respect even in defeat. They're also genocidal religious fanatics who spent 30 years trying to exterminate humanity. Palmer interjected. Her MA-5D was mag-locked to her armor, and she carried enough ammunition and grenades to fight a small war solo. Honor doesn't mean much when they're glassing your planet from orbit. A fair point, Thor acknowledged, though I have known warriors who fought for mistaken causes with genuine conviction. The Covenant believed they served their gods. Perhaps the Covenant's gods were a lie, John said, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd seen the truth firsthand. The prophets who led them knew it was a lie. They started a holy war based on fraud, and billions died because of it. Whatever honor individual elites might have, their cause was false from the beginning. The Pelicans' warning klaxon sounded. 30 seconds to LZ, the pilot called. Sensors are painting multiple hostile contacts. Looks like they've established a perimeter around the installation entrance. Chief, you're landing in a hot zone. Story of my life, John muttered. He stood, mag-locking his assault rifle to his back and drawing his magnum. The weight was familiar, comfortable. How many thousands of rounds had he fired from weapons just like this? How many enemies had fallen to UNSC ballistic technology that the Covenant had dismissed as primitive? Enough to win a war, eventually. Fire Team Osiris, sound off. Locke's voice came through the tactical channel. Jameson Locke was Spartan 4, former Oni assassin, and one of the few people who'd successfully tracked John across multiple star systems. If anyone could keep up with a Spartan 2 in combat, it was him. Tanaka, ready. Buck, good to go. Edward Buck's voice carried the easy confidence of a veteran ODST who'd survived becoming a Spartan. Just like old times, dropping into Covenant kill zones. Vale, prepared. Olympia Vale was the team's language specialist, one of the few humans who could speak fluent Sangheili. She'd tried to negotiate with the elites at Site Gamma 7. They'd tried to kill her. Some things didn't translate. Palmer, ready to kick some alien ass, the commander added cheerfully. The Pelican's ramp dropped, revealing the Montana wilderness spread below, like a tactical map come to life. Pine forests stretched to the horizon, mountains rose in jagged peaks that scraped the sky. And in the valley below, something that should not exist on Earth pulsed with alien light. The Forerunner installation was small by their standards, barely the size of a football field, but its architecture was unmistakable. Angular structures of some material that wasn't quite metal and wasn't quite stone, covered in glowing symbols that shifted and rearranged themselves in patterns that hurt to watch. The entrance was a triangular aperture 20 feet high, and purple-armored Covenant forces had established defensive positions around it. Go, go, go! John dropped from the Pelican at 200 feet, his armor's shields flaring as he activated his jump jets for controlled descent. The ground rushed up, and he hit rolling, coming up with his assault rifle already tracking targets. An elite's shields flared as John's opening burst found its mark, center mass, controlled fire, exactly as UNSC doctrine prescribed. The shields held through the first magazine, but Spartans didn't fight alone. Palmer landed beside him, her DMR cracking with precise, single shots that hammered the same elite's shields from a different angle. The shields collapsed, and John's next burst punched through the elite's armor. Purple blood sprayed, and the warrior went down. Contact left. Tanaka's voice cut across the channel as a lance of plasma fire streaked toward her position. She dove behind cover, a Forerunner, structure that absorbed the plasma without damage, and returned fire with her saw. The light machine gun's sustained fire rate overwhelming an elite's shields through sheer volume. Steve hit the ground in a textbook paratrooper landing, rolled, and came up with his shield raised just in time to intercept a fuel rod blast. The explosive round detonated against vibranium, the force dissipating harmlessly, and Steve was already moving, closing distance on the grunt artillery position with the fearless advance that had made him a legend. His shield flew in a calculated arc, struck 2 grunts, and ricocheted into a third. The small aliens squealed in panic. Their methane tanks ruptured, and the resulting explosion took out their entire position. "Effective," Vale commented, dropping an elite sniper with a headshot. "Unusual tactics, but effective." "Just getting started," Steve called back, catching his shield as it returned to him. An elite charged him with an energy sword, mandibles spread in a battle roar. Steve didn't retreat. He advanced, his shield meeting the sword in a shower of sparks and energy discharge. The elite pressed the attack, its superior strength beginning to push Steve backward. Then Tony's repulsor blast caught it from behind, shields flaring and failing, and Steve's shield came around in a devastating strike that crumpled the elite's helmet. "Teamwork," Tony said, landing beside Steve. "Not bad for interdimensional cooperation." Thor descended from the sky like an avenging god, Mjolnir trailing lightning. He landed in the center of a Covenant position with enough force to crater the ground, and lightning exploded outward in a dome that overloaded every shield within 20 meters. Elites stumbled, temporarily stunned, and Fire Team Osiris exploited the opening with ruthless efficiency. But more Covenant forces were arriving. 2 Phantoms swooped in from the north, their plasma cannons blazing, forcing the Spartans to scatter. John's motion tracker lit up with new contacts. 20, 30, 40 hostiles deploying from the dropships in organized lances. "They're reinforcing faster than we can clear them," Buck called out, his assault rifle cutting down a pair of jackals. "Chief, we need to get inside that installation before they can establish a proper siege." John was already moving, his mind processing the tactical situation with the clarity that came from 3 decades of impossible odds. The Covenant had numbers and position. The Spartans had momentum and surprise. If they could punch through to the installation entrance and secure it from inside. "Fire Team Osiris, hammer formation on me," John commanded. "Commander Palmer, covering fire. Avengers, break their line." Palmer grinned and hefted her saw. "Spartan Palmer to Infinity. Fire mission, danger close. Coordinates transmitting now." High above, Infinity's targeting computers locked onto the designated coordinates. A single Mac round, a 3,000-ton Ferris slug accelerated to 4% of light speed. Launched from one of the frigate-mounted guns. The round entered the atmosphere like the wrath of God, its passage turning air to plasma, and struck the ridgeline where Covenant reinforcements were staging. The mountain exploded. Rock, ice, and alien bodies fountained into the air as the kinetic impact released energy equivalent to a small nuclear weapon. The shockwave flattened trees for half a kilometer, and when the dust cleared, the ridgeline was simply gone, replaced by a crater that glowed red with molten stone. "That's UNSC diplomacy," Palmer said with satisfaction. "When in doubt, apply kinetic energy until the problem is solved." The surviving Covenant forces reeled from the orbital strike, their formation disrupted, command structure temporarily shattered. John didn't give them time to recover. Now. Fire Team Osiris moved as one, a wedge of armored Spartans that hit the Covenant line like a battering ram. John led. From the point, his shields absorbing plasma fire as he advanced with mechanical precision. An elite tried to block his path. John shot it. A grunt threw a plasma grenade. John caught it and threw it back. A jackal aimed its beam rifle at his head. Vale killed it before it could fire. They were through the perimeter in seconds, the Forerunner installation's entrance looming ahead. The triangular aperture was sealed with some kind of energy barrier that pulsed with symbols John recognized from Installation 04, from Requiem, from a dozen Forerunner sites he'd fought through. Vale, can you translate? Locke asked, covering the entrance while his team secured the perimeter. Olympia Vale studied the symbols, her helmet's translation software working overtime. It's a genetic lock, Forerunner standard, designed to admit humans but exclude other species. It should recognize us as reclaimers and... The barrier flickered and disappeared. Or it just opens when you get close. Vale finished. That works too. John moved through the entrance, his rifle sweeping the interior. The installation was dark, but his helmet's lights revealed a chamber that extended far deeper than should be possible given the external structure. Forerunner dimensional engineering, spaces that were larger on the inside than the outside, entire facilities hidden in pocket dimensions. The walls were covered in more shifting symbols, and at the chamber's center stood something that made John's threat assessment spike to critical. A Forerunner artifact, cylindrical and roughly the size of a vehicle, pulsing with energy that his armor's sensors identified as multiple exawatts of contained power. What is that? Steve asked, entering behind John with his shield raised. Unknown, John said. But that wasn't quite true. He'd seen similar artifacts before. Forerunner data storage, or weapons, or both. The Forerunners had a habit of making their archives double as planet killers. But if the Covenant wants it badly enough to commit cruisers, it's dangerous. Outside, the sound of renewed combat echoed. The Covenant was regrouping, preparing for another assault. Thor stood at the entrance, lightning arcing between his hands as he prepared to hold the doorway against whatever came. We cannot let them claim this artifact, Thor said. If it holds even a fraction of the power I sense within it, in the wrong hands. It won't be in their hands, John said, because we're going to secure it, extract it, and figure out what it does before the Covenant can activate it. Tony's sensors were going haywire as he scanned the artifact. Chief, this thing is putting out more power than an arc reactor. And the energy patterns, Jarvis, are you seeing this? Sir, the artifact appears to be a data storage device, but the information density exceeds anything in my database. There are terabytes, no, petabytes, of compressed data contained within. And sir, the data structure suggests it's a map. A map of what? Unknown. But the scale suggests galactic, sir. Possibly multi-galactic. John felt cold certainty settle over him. The Covenant wasn't here for a weapon or a religious relic. They were here for information, a Forerunner map that could lead them to other installations, other artifacts, other sources of power. If they got their hands on it, this Earth would be the first of many targets. Locke, Vale, prep the artifact for transport, John ordered. We're taking it back to Infinity. But before they could move, the artifact pulsed, and every symbol in the chamber shifted simultaneously. A hologram materialized above it, a three-dimensional star map showing Earth, the solar system, and beyond. Dozens of markers appeared, scattered across the galaxy, each one pulsing with the same frequency as the artifact. Blessed rings, Vale whispered. It's not just a map. It's a network index. Every Forerunner installation in this galaxy, their locations, their functions, their access codes. This is everything the Covenant ever dreamed of finding, John finished. And they know we have it. Outside, the roar of more phantom dropships filled the air. The Covenant wasn't just reinforcing anymore. They were committing everything they had. The battle for Earth's first Forerunner installation had just become a siege. The Forerunner chamber's holographic star map painted everyone in ghostly blue light as John processed the tactical nightmare they'd just inherited. 47 marked installations across this galaxy, each one a potential weapons cache, research facility, or worse. In Covenant hands, any one of them could tip the balance of power. All of them together could restart the Holy War on a scale that would make the original conflict look like a border skirmish. "Infinity, Chief," John transmitted. "We've secured the primary artifact. It's a network index for Forerunner installations across this galaxy. Recommend immediate extraction, but we've got company." Lasky's response was immediate. "Copy that, Chief. Be advised, Covenant cruisers are moving into assault positions. They know you have it, and we're detecting... Stand by." A pause. "Chief, we're picking up multiple slip-space ruptures, not Covenant signatures. Something else is coming through the dimensional rift." John's HUD flickered as Infinity transmitted new sensor data. The dimensional tear above Earth was widening, and emerging through it was a ship that made even the Covenant cruisers look small. It was human, unmistakably UNSC design language. But wrong. The hull was darker, the lines more aggressive, and the weapons batteries were configured in patterns John didn't recognize from any UNSC vessel in his dimension. "What the hell is that?" Palmer breathed, watching the tactical feed. "It's broadcasting UNSC identification codes," Lasky reported, his voice tight with controlled alarm. "Claiming to be the UNSC Vindication registry number that doesn't exist in our database. Chief, I think we're looking at a UNSC ship from another alternate dimension." The implications crashed through John's tactical assessment like a Mac round through shields. The dimensional rift wasn't just connecting two universes, it was tearing holes between multiple realities. And if the UNSC existed in some of them... "Vindication is hailing us," Lasky continued. "They're claiming to be... Jesus Christ, they're claiming to be hunting us. Chief, they're saying Infinity went rogue, committed war crimes against civilian populations, and they've been authorized to bring us in or destroy us." Steve looked up from securing the artifact. "Another UNSC? From another dimension where your ship is the enemy?" "Or they're lying," Tony interjected. "Evil doppelgangers from alternate dimensions is definitely on my bingo card for today." But John's combat instinct was screaming warnings. The UNSC had always walked a razor's edge between protection and oppression. Oni kidnapped children to create Spartans. The Cole Protocol authorized destroying colonies to prevent Covenant from finding Earth. In another reality, where different choices were made. "Lasky, do not trust them until we verify their claims," John ordered. "They could be legitimate, they could be compromised, or they could be using UNSC codes as camouflage. Maintain. Defensive posture. Already on it. But Chief, if they're UNSC, even an alternate version, we might be able to negotiate. Get them on our side against the Covenant. Or walk into a trap," Palmer added darkly. "I've seen enough Oni Black Ops to know how this plays out. Someone shows up claiming authority you can't verify, demands cooperation, and the next thing you know, you're in a cell while they steal everything you have." The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. Covenant forces outside the installation, Covenant cruisers in orbit, and now a potentially hostile UNSC ship with unknown capabilities and intentions. John ran probability calculations. None of them were good. "Fire Team Osiris, defensive positions around the artifact," John commanded. "We hold here until extraction is feasible. Vale, can you interface with the artifact? See if there's any way to lock it down or prevent Covenant access?" Vale approached the cylindrical device, her armor's scanners analyzing the Forerunner symbols. Maybe. Forerunner security is biometric. It recognizes humans as reclaimers with administrative access. If I can convince it to accept a lockdown command. Her fingers moved across the holographic interface, tracing symbols that shifted under her touch. The artifact pulsed, and suddenly a voice filled the chamber, not through speakers, but directly into their neural implants, bypassing armor and skull to speak inside their minds. Reclaimer presence confirmed. Indexing protocol activated. Warning: unauthorized access attempts detected. Defensive measures initializing. The Forerunner symbols across the walls blazed with sudden intensity, and the chamber's floor split open to reveal automated defense turrets. Hard light constructs that materialized from nothing and swiveled toward the entrance where Thor still held position. Guys," Buck called out. "The ancient alien death trap just woke up, and I don't think it's on our side." "It's Forerunner defensive, AI," John said, recognizing the pattern from Installation 04. "It detects the Covenant outside and considers them a threat. Everyone stay away from the entrance. Those turrets will fire on anything that enters without reclaimer authorization." As if to demonstrate, an elite warrior burst through the entrance, energy sword raised, and made it exactly 3 steps before a hard light beam punched through its shields and armor with casual precision. The elite didn't even have time to scream before it disintegrated into constituent atoms. Thor raised an eyebrow. "Most impressive. Though I wonder, does this defensive system recognize Asgardians as authorized?" "Don't test it," John advised. "Forerunner AI can be unpredictable." The voice spoke again, this time with an edge that suggested irritation, an impossible quality for an artificial intelligence. But the Forerunners had built their AIs to think in ways that made human constructs look like calculators. Reclaimer genetic markers confirmed. However, detected reclaimers exhibit genetic modifications inconsistent with baseline human parameters. Classification: warrior servants. Additional query: are you here to resume the mantle of responsibility? Steve glanced at John. What's it talking about? The Forerunners believed they held the mantle of responsibility, the duty to protect all life in the galaxy, John explained. They thought humans were supposed to inherit it. That's why their installations recognize us as reclaimers. It's asking if we're here to take up that responsibility. And if we say yes? Tony asked. Then it might give us full access to every installation in this galaxy, Vale said, her eyes wide behind her helmet. Complete administrative control over Forerunner technology, which is either the greatest strategic advantage in history or the most dangerous trap imaginable. John had stood before Forerunner constructs before: 343 Guilty Spark, the Didact, the Librarian. He'd learned that their gifts always came with prices. Their technology always had hidden purposes, and their ideas about protecting life sometimes involved sterilizing entire galaxies. "We're not here to claim the mantle," John said carefully, addressing the AI directly. "We're here to prevent these artifacts from being used as weapons." Insufficient authorization for mantle protocols. However, defensive posture is consistent with reclaimer preservation instincts. Artifact security protocols will remain active. Covenant forces will be prevented from accessing this installation. The defensive turrets swiveled outward, tracking targets beyond the entrance. Outside, the sounds of combat intensified as hard light beams lanced through Covenant positions with surgical precision. Elites died before they could raise shields. Grunts evaporated mid-charge. Even the Phantom's armor couldn't withstand the concentrated fire. 2 dropships exploded in mid-air, raining debris across the valley. "Well, that's one problem solved," Tanaka commented. "The installation's defending itself." "Which creates a new problem," Locke said, checking his tactical display. The Covenant isn't going to give up because of automated defenses. They'll escalate, bring in heavier weapons, orbital bombardment, whatever it takes. As if summoned by his words, Infinity's transmission cut through with urgent priority. Chief, Covenant cruisers are charging their energy projectors. They're preparing to glass the installation site from orbit. John's blood ran cold. Energy projectors. Plasma weapons that could turn continents into molten glass. The Covenant had used them to sterilize hundreds of worlds during the war. If they fired... Lasky, can Infinity intercept? We can take one, maybe two cruisers before the third gets a firing solution. Chief, if they're willing to glass their own ground forces to deny us that artifact, we need to extract now. But the Forerunner AI had other ideas. Orbital bombardment detected. Initiating installation defensive protocols. Stand by. The ground shuddered. Not from an explosion, but from something vast awakening beneath them. The entire Forerunner installation began to rise, rock and soil falling away as the structure revealed its true form. Not a small facility buried in the mountain, but a massive construct that had been hidden underground, its dimensions extending for kilometers in every direction. Holy, Buck started. Mother of God, Tanaka finished. The installation lifted into the sky, anti-gravity generators that defied physics, holding thousands of tons aloft as if they weighed nothing. And as it rose, weapons ports opened across its surface, dozens, then hundreds of them, each one housing a hard light projector that began tracking the Covenant cruisers in orbit. Installation designation: Archive Complex 08051. Primary function: data preservation and defensive coordination. Secondary function: orbital defense platform. Tertiary function: strategic deterrent. Reclaimers remain in secure zones. Hostile vessels will be neutralized. The hard light cannons fired. Beams of concentrated energy, each one carrying enough power to vaporize a city block, lanced upward through the atmosphere. They struck the nearest Covenant cruiser's shields with the kind of force that made UNSC MAC guns look gentle by comparison. The shields held for exactly 2.3 seconds before failing catastrophically. The beam punched through the cruiser's armor, through its hull, through every deck and bulkhead, and out the other side. For a moment, the massive warship hung in space, a perfectly cylindrical hole drilled through its center. Then secondary explosions rippled through its structure as plasma containment failed, and the cruiser tore itself apart from the inside. The remaining two cruisers scattered, their tactical doctrine recognizing a superior threat when they saw one. They began charging their slipspace drives, retreating, abandoning their ground forces. Installation's not letting them leave, Vale said, watching sensor feeds as more hard light cannons tracked the fleeing ships. Chief, I think we just activated a Forerunner superweapon. Not a weapon, the AI corrected, somehow detecting their conversation. A Guardian. Installations such as this were positioned across strategic locations to prevent misuse of Forerunner technology. You have activated Archive Complex defensive protocols. Covenant intrusion will not be tolerated. The second cruiser took a hard light lance through its engines. The ship lost power, drifting dead in space, its crew likely evacuating in escape pods. The third cruiser managed to open a slipspace portal and disappeared, but not before the installation fired one final shot that followed it through the rupture. Seconds later, sensor feeds from Infinity registered a massive energy discharge in slipspace itself. The third cruiser had been destroyed mid-jump, torn apart by a weapon that could fire across dimensions. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the Covenant ground forces had stopped shooting, staring up at the hovering installation that had just casually destroyed 3 capital ships. John could imagine their thoughts. They'd come for sacred artifacts and found a god. Infinity status report, John called, trying to regain control of a situation that had spiraled far beyond any tactical plan. Chief, we're honestly not sure what we're looking at, Lasky responded. That installation just demonstrated firepower that exceeds anything in UNSC or Covenant arsenals. And it's still active, still tracking targets. We're detecting it scanning the entire solar system, cataloging every ship, every station, every satellite. Solar system scan complete, the AI announced. Multiple unauthorized vessels detected. Classification, unknown human variant. Query: are these vessels under reclaimer authority? The UNSC Vindication. Installation had detected the alternate dimension ship and was treating it as a potential threat. Stand down defensive protocols, John ordered, hoping the AI would recognize reclaimer authority. Those vessels are complicated. We need time to verify their intentions. Negative. Defensive protocols are non-negotiable. Unauthorized vessels will be given 30 minutes to depart solar system or face engagement. This is Forerunner mandate. 30 minutes, Tony said flatly. So that's an ultimatum to everyone in orbit. Leave or get vaporized by ancient alien death lasers. Steve moved to John's side, his expression grave. Chief, we need to shut this thing down before it starts a shooting war with everyone in orbit. That UNSC ship, whatever it is, might have legitimate reasons for being here. And there could be civilian vessels we don't know about. John agreed, but the tactical reality was stark. Vale, can you interface with the AI? Get it to power down or at least pause the countdown. Vale was already working, her hands moving across holographic interfaces. I'm trying, but Forerunner AI operates on logic frameworks that don't translate well. It sees unauthorized ships, designates them as threats, and executes defensive protocols. There's no pause option, only compliance or elimination. Then we convince it the ships are authorized, Palmer suggested. Tell it we vouch for them. Insufficient authority, the AI responded immediately. Reclaimer genetic markers grant access to archive data and defensive coordination, but full administrative control requires confirmation of mantle inheritance. Without such confirmation, defensive protocols operate autonomously. Thor stepped forward. Mjolnir held at his side. Ancient intelligence. I am Thor of Asgard, son of Odin, protector of Midgard. These vessels you detect are under my protection. Will you accept the word of an Asgardian god? The installation paused, its weapons briefly ceasing their tracking. Anomalous entity detected. Genetic structure inconsistent with reclaimer parameters. Elevated energy signature suggests accessing historical records. Cross-referencing with Tier 2 civilization databases. Classification, Asgard. Note: Forerunner diplomatic records indicate Asgardian realm as extragalactic power. Status: non-hostile Tier 2 civilization. Query: does Asgard claim sovereignty over this world? Thor's expression was thoughtful. Asgard protects the 9 realms, of which Midgard, this Earth, is one. We do not claim sovereignty, but we do claim responsibility for its defense. Acceptable. Asgardian authority recognized. However, defensive protocols require verification of unknown vessel intentions. Recommend diplomatic contact within 27 minutes. John opened a channel to Infinity. Lasky, patch me through to the Vindication. We need to talk to them before this installation decides to start shooting. Already on it, Chief. Opening channel now. The voice that came through was female, professional, carrying the weight of command. UNSC Vindication to Infinity. I am Captain Sarah Palmer. Yes, that Palmer from the alternate dimension where my counterpart stands beside you. We've been tracking your ship across 17 dimensional rifts. In our reality, Infinity went rogue under Oni control, committed genocide against colony worlds that refused to submit to military rule. We've been authorized to stop you by any means necessary. Commander Palmer's response was immediate and vicious. Bullshit. I would never. You didn't. The alternate Palmer interrupted. In your dimension. In ours, the war with the Covenant ended differently. Humanity survived, but at a cost. The UNSC became a military dictatorship, and Infinity became its enforcer. We're the Resistance, the real UNSC. And we're here to make sure you don't become what we're fighting against. John processed this, his tactical mind categorizing the new threat. An alternate UNSC, convinced Infinity was the enemy, armed with equivalent technology and the conviction of righteous resistance. And they had less than 30 minutes before a Forerunner installation decided to solve the problem with overwhelming force. This day just keeps getting better, Palmer muttered. The Situation Room aboard Infinity was crowded with people who shouldn't exist in the same space. Captain Lasky representing the UNSC, Fury and Hill for S.H.I.E.L.D., Tony Stark and Steve Rogers for the Avengers, and on the main holographic display, Captain Sarah Palmer from a dimension where everything had gone terribly wrong. John stood at tactical, his armor's systems monitoring the countdown. 19 minutes until the Forerunner installation executed its threat protocols. Around him, 3 separate crises competed for attention. The Covenant remnants regrouping for another assault, the alternate dimension UNSC ship claiming authority to judge them, and the ancient AI that had decided it was everyone's problem now. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Fury said, his single eye fixed on the holographic Palmer. In your dimension, the UNSC won the war against the Covenant, then turned its weapons on its own colonies? Not immediately, alternate Palmer replied. Her face was older than the Palmer standing beside John, scarred in ways that spoke of harder fights and darker compromises. After the war, the outer colonies wanted independence. 30 years of military rule had left them resentful. When they tried to break away, Oni decided that humanity was too fragile to survive division, so they made an example. What kind of example? Steve asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Harvest, Reach, Installation 03. Alternate Palmer's voice was flat, professionally detached in the way soldiers used to discuss atrocities. They activated Forerunner weapons against human populations. Billions dead, classified as acceptable losses for species cohesion. Infinity was the enforcement arm, the ship that showed up when colonies refused to comply. Commander Palmer's hands clenched into fists. That's not us. That will never be us. That's what your counterpart said, alternate Palmer replied. Right up until Oni convinced her that sacrificing a few colonies would save the species. The road to hell, Commander. It's paved with necessary evils. Lasky's jaw was tight, his command presence barely containing his anger. Captain Palmer, I sympathize with what your dimension endured. But we are not your enemy. We didn't choose to come here, and we're not following orders from anyone. We can't even contact our command structure. Which makes you unpredictable, alternate Palmer countered. A rogue UNSC warship with no oversight, no accountability, and enough firepower to threaten civilizations. You've already activated a Forerunner installation that's threatening to destroy ships in orbit. How is that different from what we're fighting against? Because we're trying to protect this world from the Covenant, John said, his voice cutting through the debate. Captain, I don't know what happened in your dimension, but in ours, Spartans were created to fight the Covenant, not to oppress humanity. And right now, we have bigger problems than your suspicions. He pulled up the tactical display, showing the Covenant forces regrouping across 3 continents. While we've been arguing, the servants of the abiding truth have deployed forces to 4 more Forerunner sites. They're not giving up because we took one installation. They're adapting, spreading their forces to maximize recovery before the other installations wake up. Tony highlighted the locations: Montana, New Mexico, Colorado, and, great, one in Siberia, which means we're about to have international diplomatic incidents on top of everything else. Russia's already mobilizing military assets, Hill reported, reading intelligence feeds. So is China. They're detecting unusual energy signatures and assuming it's foreign military incursion. If Covenant forces engage national militaries before we can coordinate, conventional forces will be slaughtered, Palmer said bluntly. Elites against soldiers with standard equipment, it'll be a massacre. Thor had been silent, listening to the strategic discussion with the patience of someone who'd witnessed millennia of mortal conflicts. Now he spoke, his voice carrying divine authority. We waste time with accusations and contingencies, while innocents face annihilation. The Covenant forces must be stopped. The Forerunner installations must be secured. And this dispute between alternate dimensions must be resolved through action, not debate. Agreed, Steve said. Captain Palmer, the alternate one. You claim to be hunting rogue UNSC forces. Fine. Then help us stop the actual threat. The Covenant doesn't care about our dimensional politics. They want those Forerunner installations, and if they get them, everyone loses. Alternate Palmer was silent for a long moment, her scarred face unreadable. And if we help you, if we commit our forces, how do we know you won't use those installations the same way our Infinity did? You don't, Lasky said simply. Just like we don't know if your ship is actually UNSC Resistance or something else wearing our colors. But here's what I know. Right now, the Covenant is the immediate threat. After we deal with them, we can have whatever reckoning you think is necessary. But if we fight each other while they dig up Forerunner weapons, none of this matters. The countdown timer reached 15 minutes. The Forerunner AI's voice echoed across all channels. 14 minutes until defensive protocol execution. Unauthorized vessels must declare intentions or depart solar system. 13 minutes to decide, John said. Captain Palmer, what's it going to be? The alternate Palmer's image flickered as she consulted with her own crew, voices too low to make out. When she returned, her expression was harder. Vindication will assist against Covenant forces. But understand this. We're not trusting you. We're working with you because the alternative is worse. After the Covenant is handled, we settle accounts. Fair enough, Lasky replied. Tactical coordination. We'll need to split our forces to cover multiple installations simultaneously. Chief, recommendations. John pulled up the strategic map, his tactical computer running engagement scenarios. 4 Covenant-occupied sites. Unknown enemy strength at each, limited friendly forces. Standard UNSC doctrine said, you never split your forces against superior numbers. But standard doctrine assumed you didn't have Spartans, Avengers, and Asgardian gods. Fire Team Osiris takes New Mexico. It's the closest to our current position, John said. Commander Palmer leads the assault, with Vale as language specialist in case we can negotiate with any surviving elites who aren't fanatics. Not likely, but I'll try, Vale said. Fire Team Majestic deploys to Colorado with shield support. Fury, can you mobilize aerial assets for them? Already on it, Fury confirmed. We've got Quinjets and conventional air support scrambling now. Thor, you're with me on the Siberia site. Tony, Steve, you too. That one's the most politically sensitive. Russian military is going to be there, and we need someone who can talk to them without starting World War III. I speak fluent Russian. Natasha's voice came through the tactical channel. She'd been coordinating with SHIELD ground forces, but now she stepped into the situation room. And I have history with Russian intelligence. They'll listen to me, probably. That leaves Montana, Lasky said, studying the display. The installation we just activated. It's defended, but if the Covenant commits serious forces, Vindication will cover it. Alternate Palmer interrupted. Our ship has equivalent firepower to yours, and we can maintain orbital overwatch. If Covenant reinforcements arrive, we'll intercept. Just like that? Commander Palmer's skepticism was obvious. You trust us to handle ground operations while you control the orbital position? No, Alternate Palmer said flatly. But I trust that you won't activate Forerunner weapons against civilians while we're watching. And if you try, Vindication is in position to stop you. The two Palmers stared at each other across dimensions. The same person shaped by different choices, different wars, different costs of survival. John wondered which version was closer to what Commander Palmer might become if pushed far enough. He hoped he'd never find out. All teams, you have your assignments, Lasky announced. Move out in 10 minutes, and Chief, try not to activate any more ancient superweapons. One is complicated enough. No promises, John replied, already heading for the armory. His shields were at full charge, but he needed to restock ammunition, check his equipment, and prepare for combat in conditions that would be complicated by Russian military involvement and unknown Forerunner defensive systems. Vale caught up with him in the corridor. Chief, about the Forerunner AI at the Montana site? It responded to Thor's authority because of historical records. That means the Forerunners encountered Asgard at some point. If there are other extragalactic civilizations in their database, then this isn't just about Earth, John finished. The installations might be monitoring threats across multiple realms, not just physical space, which means activating them could have consequences we don't understand. Exactly. These archives contain location data for Forerunner sites, but they also contain defensive protocols designed to prevent misuse. If we keep triggering those protocols, we could wake up an entire network of defensive installations, John said. All of them deciding what constitutes a threat based on 100,000-year-old parameters. It was the kind of cascading problem that Cortana would have analyzed in microseconds, providing risk assessments and strategic alternatives. But Cortana was gone, and John was operating on instinct, experience, and the absolute certainty that doing nothing was worse than acting. We secure the sites, prevent Covenant access, and figure out the rest later, John decided. Priority 1 is stopping the servants of the abiding truth. Priority 2 is managing the Forerunner AI. Priority 3 is surviving long enough to worry about priorities 1 and 2, Vale finished. Standard Spartan operational planning. They reached the armory where the rest of the assault teams were gearing up. Tony was running final diagnostics on his armor while arguing with Jarvis about power allocation. Steve was checking his borrowed UNSC weapons with the methodical attention of a soldier who'd learned that equipment failures killed you just as dead as enemy fire. Thor was eating a protein bar from the UNSC supplies, looking faintly disappointed that human military rations hadn't improved in 2,500 years. Is this truly what your warriors sustain themselves with? Thor asked, examining the bar with divine skepticism. In Asgard, we feast before battle, build strength for the coming fight. In the UNSC, we eat whatever's available and fight on empty stomachs if necessary, John replied, checking his Magnum's magazine. You get used to it. I shall not get used to it. When this is done, I shall introduce you to proper warriors' fare. If we survive, Natasha added, appearing with her equipment. She'd requisitioned UNSC weapons, an M6 Magnum and an MA-5D assault rifle, and moved with them like she'd been using UNSC equipment for years. Spies learned to adapt. Siberia in January, alien invasion, and possible Russian military engagement. This is either going to be the best mission of my career or my last. Why not both? Tony suggested, his faceplate snapping down. Jarvis, route powered to repulsors. We're going to Siberia, and I want maximum speed. The faster we get there, the less time the Covenant has to dig up whatever they're looking for. The Pelican designated for their team was prepped and ready, its pilot already running. Pre-flight checks. John boarded last, as was his habit. The leader enters last, leaves first, a principle Spartans learned early. The troop bay was cramped with 5 people in powered armor, but military transports weren't designed for comfort. Through the viewport, he could see the other teams boarding their transports. Fire Team Osiris moving with practiced coordination, majestic loading into a Pelican flanked by Shield Quinjets. And in high orbit, both Infinity and Vindication holding position, 2 versions of the same ship representing 2 very different futures. All teams, this is Lasky. The captain's voice came through the tactical channel. You're cleared for deployment. Infinity will provide orbital fire support where possible, but you're going into hostile territory with unknown force compositions. Watch each other's backs, trust your training, and remember, we're not just fighting for the UNSC anymore. We're fighting for an Earth that doesn't even know what's at stake. The Pelican's engines roared to life, and they lifted off from Infinity's hangar bay. Through the viewport, Earth spread below them. Blue oceans, white clouds, green continents unmarred by plasma bombardment. This Earth hadn't been tested by the Covenant's genocidal fury. It didn't have orbital defense platforms or fleet assets. Its people didn't wake up every morning knowing their species teetered on the edge of extinction. But it was about to learn what humanity in John's dimension had learned decades ago. The universe was vast, hostile, and full of things that wanted to kill you. The only question was whether you fought back or died quietly. Spartans had never been good at dying quietly. ETA to Siberia, 20 minutes, the pilot announced. We're taking a ballistic trajectory to minimize detection time. Hold on to something. This is going to be a rough ride. The Pelican's nose tilted down, and they plunged into the atmosphere, friction turning the viewport orange as they streaked toward a frozen battlefield where ancient secrets waited and genocidal zealots prepared to claim them. John checked his weapons one final time and prepared to do what Spartans did best: turn impossible odds into tactical victories through superior firepower, strategic thinking, and the absolute refusal to accept defeat. The Covenant wanted a holy war. They were about to get a Spartan instead. The Siberian tundra stretched below them like a frozen wasteland. Endless white broken only by jagged rock formations and sparse evergreen forests that had survived millennia of ice and wind. The Pelican descended through cloud cover at a trajectory that would have made civilian pilots refuse to fly. But UNSC dropship operators had learned their craft dodging Covenant anti-air during the war's darkest days. Contact! The pilot called out. Russian military convoy, 15 clicks north of target site. Looks like they're setting up a perimeter. And I'm reading energy signatures. Covenant dropships are already on site. John's HUD painted the tactical picture in cold digital clarity. Russian forces. Approximately 200 soldiers with armored vehicles, establishing defensive positions around what looked like an archaeological excavation that had been here for years. Someone had found this site long before the Covenant arrived, but hadn't understood what they'd discovered. Covenant forces. 4 Phantom dropships worth of troops, estimated 64 combatants, mostly elites with grunt and jackal support. They'd established a perimeter around the Forerunner installation's entrance and were engaging Russian forces with the casual efficiency of warriors who'd fought for millennia. "Russians are taking casualties," Natasha said, her expression grim as she analyzed the battlefield through her tactical scope. "Their weapons aren't penetrating elite shields effectively. They're brave, disciplined, but they're fighting with doctrine designed for human opponents." "Then we teach them how to fight aliens," Steve said, checking his shield. "Same as what happened when I joined the Avengers. You adapt or you die." The Pelican's rear ramp dropped, and Arctic wind howled through the troop bay, carrying the sound of distant weapons fire. The temperature was -30°C, cold enough to kill an unprotected human in minutes. John's armor compensated automatically, his Mjolnir's environmental systems maintaining optimal operating temperature. 30 seconds to LZ, the pilot announced. "Setting you down behind the Russian lines. Try not to start an international incident." "No promises," Tony muttered, his armor's anti-icing systems working overtime. They dropped from 50 feet, powered armor absorbing impacts that would have shattered human bones. John hit the frozen ground and immediately scanned for threats. Motion tracker painting hostiles in red, friendlies in blue, unknowns in yellow. The Russian forces registered as yellow, not hostile, but not confirmed allies either. "Thor, with me," John ordered. "We're making contact with Russian command. Everyone else, establish overwatch positions. If the Covenant push the Russian lines, we intervene." Thor landed beside him with enough force to crack the permafrost, Mjolnir already crackling with barely contained lightning. Together, they approached the Russian command position, a cluster of armored vehicles where officers were coordinating what was quickly becoming a losing battle. The Russian soldiers saw them coming and weapons immediately tracked their movement. John raised his hand slightly, palms visible, the universal gesture of non-aggression, though his magnum remained holstered and ready. "I am Master Chief Petty Officer John 117, United Nations Space Command," John announced in English, knowing most Russian military officers spoke it. "We're here to assist against the hostile forces attacking your position." A colonel stepped forward, his face weathered by years, and his eyes carrying the hardness of someone who'd seen combat. When he spoke, his English was accented, but clear. "Colonel Mikhail Volkov, 45th Guard Spetsnaz Brigade. You are American Special Forces?" "Allied Forces," John replied, which was technically true. "The hostiles attacking your position are called the Covenant, an alliance of alien species. Your weapons won't be effective against their energy shields without modification. We have experience fighting them." Volkov's expression suggested he was processing impossible information while explosions lit up the background and his men died. Aliens, of course, because this day was not strange enough already. He gestured to the excavation site. 3 days ago, that structure activated. Scientists were studying it for years, thinking it was ancient human ruins. Then it began glowing, and these creatures arrived. "The structure is Forerunner technology," Thor interjected. "Ancient beyond your civilization's reckoning. The creatures seek to claim it for their own purposes." Volkov studied Thor, his armor, his bearing, the hammer that hummed with barely contained power. "And you are?" "Thor Odinson of Asgard, protector of Midgard. Your myths remember my people, though the stories have become embellished over time." The colonel's laugh was short and bitter. "Aliens and gods. My commanding officer will never believe this. Report." He turned back to John. "We have wounded, many wounded. Our weapons damage these creatures, but slowly. By the time we break their shields, more arrive. We cannot hold this position much longer." "You don't have to hold alone," John said. "My team will engage the Covenant forces directly. Your troops provide supporting fire and protect the flanks. Concentrate fire on single targets to overwhelm their shields. Sustained burst fire from multiple angles. Don't let them close to melee range. Their energy blades will cut through your armor like paper. Understood. And the structure? We secure it, John said flatly. It can't fall into Covenant hands. After the battle, we'll need to coordinate with your government about proper security protocols. Volkov nodded sharply, the gesture of a soldier accepting tactical reality even when he didn't understand the strategic picture. My men will follow your lead. Just keep them alive. That's the plan. John switched to the team channel. All units, we're going loud. Steve, Natasha, left flank. There's a Covenant lance pushing the Russian perimeter. Thor, you're with me on the center. Tony, air support and target designation. Light them up. Finally, Tony said, his repulsors flaring as he rocketed into the sky. Jarvis, mark priority targets. Sir, I'm detecting 3 elite zealots coordinating the Covenant assault. Eliminating them should disrupt their formation. Then let's disrupt. Tony's weapon systems locked onto the first zealot, and a salvo of micro-missiles streaked downward. The elite's shields flared brilliant purple, holding against the initial impact, but the sustained barrage overwhelmed them. The second wave of missiles found armor, and the zealot disappeared in an explosion that sent purple blood and shattered metal across the snow. The Covenant response was immediate. Plasma fire arced skyward, bolts of superheated gas tracking Tony's position with alarming accuracy. He jinked left, then right, his armor's mobility the only thing keeping him alive as the Covenant adjusted their fire patterns. They're adapting to my flight path, Tony called. These things learn fast. Welcome to the Covenant, John replied, already moving toward the central engagement zone. His assault rifle came up, controlled bursts hammering into an elite's shields. The warrior turned toward him, mandibles spread in challenge and charged with energy sword raised. John didn't retreat. He advanced, angling his approach to make the elite adjust its strike. At the last possible second, his enhanced reflexes screamed and he twisted. The energy blade passed inches from his helmet, close enough that his shields flared from proximity discharge. His counterstrike was brutally efficient. Armor-plated elbow to the elite's mandibles, stunning it, leg sweep taking out its hooves, and before it could recover, his magnum pressed against its neck seal and fired 3 times. Purple blood steamed on the frozen ground. Chief, you're getting swarmed. Natasha's voice cut through as his motion tracker lit up with contacts. She was right. 5 elites were converging on his position, recognizing the demon and prioritizing his elimination. But they'd forgotten about Thor. The god of thunder descended from the sky like divine judgment, Mjolnir leading his descent. He struck the frozen ground with enough force to create a shockwave that knocked elites off their hooves and shattered their shield generators through kinetic overload alone. Lightning exploded outward in a dome, and when the brightness faded, 3 elites lay twitching, their armor's electronics fried beyond recovery. The remaining 2 attempted to retreat and reorganize, but Russian forces, emboldened by seeing the aliens fall, opened up with concentrated fire. AK-12 rifles might not have been designed for shield warfare, but enough bullets from enough angles eventually overwhelmed even Covenant technology. The elites went down under a hail of gunfire that would have made their ancestors proud. Left flank is clear, Steve reported, his shield bearing fresh scorch marks from plasma impacts. But we've got more phantoms inbound. The Covenant is reinforcing. John checked his tactical display. 8 new contacts, incoming fast. 2 more phantom dropships carrying full combat loads. And behind them, something larger. His threat assessment spiked as sensors identified a Covenant cruiser, not one of the 3 that had been destroyed, but a fresh contact emerging from slip space at low altitude. Infinity, we have a Cass-class carrier entering atmosphere over Siberia, John transmitted. That's a siege breaker, if it reaches firing position. Already tracking it, Chief, Lasky replied. Vindication is moving to intercept, but they're going to need support. Palmer, our Palmer, is scrambling longswords to provide fighter cover. The Covenant carrier hung in the sky like a predator, its lateral plasma, torpedo launchers already charging. It wasn't targeting the Forerunner installation. It couldn't risk damaging what it came to claim. It was targeting the Russian military positions, preparing to eliminate all resistance in one overwhelming strike. That ship's going to glass the entire area, Natasha said, her tactical mind processing the threat. Everyone within 5 kilometers. We'll die if we don't stop it, John finished. He turned to Volkov. Colonel, evacuate your wounded, now. Pull back to minimum safe distance. That ship is about to turn this valley into molten glass. Volkov looked up at the massive warship, his face pale but determined. We do not run from enemy fire. You do, if you want to live to fight again, Steve said, moving to the colonel's side. This isn't about courage. It's about not throwing away lives when we have a better option. Get your people clear. We'll handle the ship. The colonel hesitated, then nodded sharply and began barking orders in Russian. His troops began a fighting withdrawal, carrying wounded and providing covering fire as they retreated from positions they'd fought hard to hold. Tony, how much power can you divert to your repulsors? John asked, his tactical computer running scenarios. Depends what you're planning. If you're asking if I can take down a ship the size of an aircraft carrier, let me think. No, absolutely not. That thing probably has shields that could tank a nuke. Not asking you to destroy it, John said. Just distract it. Keep its attention on you while Thor and I deal with the Forerunner installation. Oh, is that all? Just dance around an alien warship's weapons fire while you two handle the easy part? Despite his sarcasm, Tony's repulsors were already flaring brighter. Jarvis, reroute all non-essential power to mobility. This is going to be the stupidest thing we've done today. Sir, I feel obligated to point out that today has featured multiple extremely inadvisable decisions. Then, this will fit right in. Tony streaked toward the Covenant carrier, his armor's missiles launching in waves. The carrier's shields absorbed them effortlessly, but its point defense plasma cannons tracked his position and began firing. Bolts of superheated gas filled the air, turning the Siberian sky into a deadly light show. Thor looked at John, his expression mixing respect with divine amusement. Your metal friend is either the bravest mortal I have encountered or the most foolish. Perhaps both. Definitely both, John agreed. Let's make sure his sacrifice matters. We need to get inside that installation and secure whatever the Covenant is after. The Forerunner structure was partially excavated, its angular architecture jutting from the ice like a wound in reality. Russian scientists had been studying it for years without understanding its true nature. Now, with the exterior defenses inactive and the Covenant forces temporarily scattered by the combined assault, it was vulnerable. John and Thor reached the entrance, a triangular aperture identical to the Montana site, but sealed with an energy barrier. Unlike the previous installation, this one didn't immediately recognize them as reclaimers. The symbols covering the barrier pulsed with an angry red light. It's not opening, John said, examining the barrier. The AI isn't responding to human presence. Perhaps it requires different authentication, Thor suggested. He raised Mjolnir and channeled lightning through the hammer, directing it at the barrier. The energy made contact, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then the symbols shifted from red to blue, and a voice emerged, female, ancient, carrying harmonics that suggested multiple speakers talking in perfect synchronization. Anomalous entity detected. Divine class power signature recognized. Accessing Forerunner diplomatic archives. Asgardian realm confirmed. Query: does Asgard seek access to archive facilities? We seek to prevent misuse of Forerunner technology by hostile forces. Thor replied formally, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd negotiated with cosmic powers before. In the name of Asgard's protection of the 9 realms, I request access. Asgardian authority recognized. However, detected reclaimer presence complicates authorization protocols. Both Asgard and humanity possess historical claim to Forerunner legacy. Recommendation: joint access granted under diplomatic oversight. The barrier flickered and dissolved, granting entry. John and Thor entered, their different technologies painting the interior in contrasting styles. John's Visar mode showing tactical overlays and threat assessments. Thor's Asgardian senses detecting magical and cosmic energies that UNSC sensors couldn't measure. The chamber beyond was massive, extending deep underground through impossible geometry. At its center stood another artifact. But this one was different. It wasn't cylindrical like the Montana device. This was a sphere, 3 meters in diameter, hovering in midair and covered in symbols that rotated through configurations faster than the eye could follow. Archive Complex 08052, the AI announced. Primary function, monitoring dimensional barriers. Secondary function, cataloging extra-dimensional intrusions. Tertiary function, sealing breaches in space-time fabric. Status: critical, dimensional integrity compromised. Multiple unauthorized rifts detected across solar system. John felt cold realization wash over him. The installations weren't just storing information about Forerunner sites. They were monitoring dimensional stability. And the rift that brought Infinity to this dimension had compromised that stability. How many rifts? John asked. 17 major breaches, 43 minor fractures, dimensional walls weakening at exponential rate. If current progression continues, complete dimensional collapse estimated in 72 hours. 3 days, Thor said quietly. 3 days. Until realities begin bleeding into each other uncontrollably. And every time something crosses through, every Covenant ship, every UNSC vessel, it makes the problem worse. John finished. He opened a channel to Infinity. Lasky, we've got a situation. The Forerunner installation is saying the dimensional rifts are destabilizing. If we don't find a way to seal them... The explosion cut him off. Not near them, but outside. Massive. Close enough that the Forerunner chamber shook. John's external sensors showed carnage. The Covenant carrier had fired its plasma torpedoes, but not at the ground. It had fired at Vindication. The alternate dimension UNSC ship hung in the sky, its shields failing, entire sections of its hull breaching to vacuum. It was dying, and as it died, escape pods began launching, hundreds of them, each carrying crew that had crossed dimensions to stop what they thought was a rogue UNSC vessel. Vindication is going down. Lasky's voice was tight with controlled horror. They took a direct hit protecting a Russian city. The carrier was aiming for civilian targets, and they intercepted. Alternate Palmer's voice came through, static-filled and fading. Infinity. This is Vindication. We're negative on containment. Hull breaches across 12 decks. Engineering is gone. We're abandoning ship. A pause filled with the sound of alarms and distant explosions. Tell my counterpart. Tell her we were wrong. You're not them. You're better. Finish what we... The transmission cut off as Vindication's reactor went critical. The ship broke apart in orbit, its debris raining down across Siberia like falling stars, each one carrying the dreams and fears of a dimension that had lost its way. And in that moment, John understood what was at stake. Not just this Earth, not just stopping the Covenant, but preventing every dimension from collapsing into a multiversal war where every version of humanity fought itself while reality tore apart around them. AI, John said, his voice carrying absolute command. Tell me how to seal the rifts, whatever it takes. Dimensional repair requires coordinated activation of all archive complexes. 17 installations must synchronize to reinforce reality barriers. However, current hostile forces prevent safe activation. Recommendation: eliminate all unauthorized entities from installation vicinity, then commence sealing protocol. So we need to secure every Forerunner site simultaneously and activate them in perfect sync, Thor summarized. While fighting Covenant forces, managing collapsing dimensions, and preventing international conflicts. John checked his ammunition. 2 magazines left for the assault rifle, 1 for the Magnum. His shields were at 70%. His armor had taken damage but remained functional. By any objective measure, the situation was impossible, which meant it was just another Tuesday for a Spartan. Then we'd better get started, John said. The command center aboard Infinity had become a nexus of impossible coordination. Holographic displays showed 17 Forerunner installation sites across Earth's surface, each one marked with status indicators that shifted between red and amber as teams fought to secure them. Captain Lasky stood at the center of it all, orchestrating a military operation that spanned continents, dimensions, and species. Fire Team Osiris reports New Mexico site secured. Palmer's voice came through, breathless from combat. 23 Covenant KIA, no friendly casualties. The installation's AI is online and waiting for synchronization command. Acknowledged, Lasky replied. That's 7 sites secured, 10 to go, and we're running out of time. The tactical display showed the grim mathematics of their situation. 61 hours until dimensional collapse, 17 installations that needed simultaneous activation, and Covenant forces that had committed everything they had to prevent exactly that outcome. Master Chief stood in the Siberian installation's central chamber, the spherical artifact pulsing with energy as the Forerunner AI processed their requirements. Outside, the sounds of battle had diminished. The Covenant carrier that had destroyed Vindication was now itself under assault from Infinity's Mac guns and a squadron of Russian Su-57 fighters whose pilots had decided that alien invaders were a bigger threat than international politics. Chief, we've analyzed the activation sequence. Vale's voice came through the tactical network. She was back at the Montana site, interfacing with that installation's AI. All 17 sites need to pulse their dimensional stabilizers in perfect synchronization. We're talking nanosecond precision across thousands of kilometers. One site out of sync and the whole thing fails. Can the installations coordinate themselves? John asked. Yes, but they need a human, a reclaimer, at each site to provide authorization. The Forerunners, built-in safeguards to prevent automated activation of reality-altering technology. Someone with human DNA has to be physically present to give final approval. John processed that. 17 sites, limited personnel. We have 6 Spartan fire teams deployed, 3 Avengers strike teams, and approximately 200 SHIELD agents scattered across engagement zones. That's not enough bodies for simultaneous authorization. Actually, sir, we have more resources than you think, a new voice interjected. Commander Palmer, who'd linked into the tactical network from New Mexico. That Covenant carrier didn't just attack Vindication. Its plasma bombardment scattered wreckage across half of Siberia, And guess who's been recovering survivors? John's HUD updated with new data. Escape pods from Vindication, scattered across Russia, Kazakhstan, Mongolia. The alternate dimension UNSC crew, soldiers who'd crossed realities hunting what they thought was a rogue warship, now stranded in an unfamiliar dimension. They're UNSC, Palmer continued. Alternate dimension or not, they've got the same genetic markers the Forerunner installations recognize. And after Vindication sacrificed itself to protect civilians, they've got reason to help us. Assuming they trust us enough to coordinate, Steve Rogers added. He was at the Colorado site with Fire Team Majestic, holding a perimeter against Covenant forces that kept testing their defenses with probing attacks. Captain, I've been talking to some of the Vindication survivors we've recovered. They're angry, grieving, and they blame dimensional rifts for destroying their ship. If we can convince them that sealing the rifts prevents what happened to their dimension from spreading, they might work with us, Fury finished. He was coordinating from Infinity's command deck, his network of international contacts proving invaluable as global governments struggled to process the reality of alien invasion. I'm already talking to world leaders, Russia, China, the US, EU. Everyone wants this situation contained before it gets worse. If we can show them that activating these installations will seal the rifts and prevent more cross-dimensional invasions, then we turn this into a global effort, Lasky said, seeing the strategy form. Not UNSC imposing solutions on MCU Earth, but genuine cooperation between dimensions and nations. Palmer, both Palmers, start coordinating with Vindication survivors. Get them to the nearest installation sites. Shield, work with local governments to establish security perimeters. Spartans, Avengers, you're on rapid response. Any site that gets hit hard, you reinforce. What about the Covenant carrier? Tony asked. He was in mid-air above Siberia, his armor scarred and smoking from sustained combat, but his arc reactor still pulsed strong. That thing's still operational, and it's going to fight to prevent us from activating these installations. Leave the carrier to us, Lasky replied. Infinity versus one caste class? Those are acceptable odds. But John knew better. One Covenant carrier was serious firepower, but it wasn't the real problem. The real problem was Shipmaster Artas Vadum, who demonstrated tactical brilliance by spreading Covenant forces across multiple sites, forcing the UNSC to divide its strength. The elite commander hadn't survived thousands of years of warfare through reckless aggression. He was playing a deeper game. The Covenant knows we're coordinating something, John said, speaking to the entire command network. Artas Vadum is too experienced to miss the pattern of our deployments. He's going to concentrate forces on one or two key installations and try to prevent activation there, knowing it'll cascade failure across the entire network. So, which sites does he hit? Natasha asked. She was with John and Thor in Siberia, having helped evacuate Russian wounded while simultaneously gathering intelligence from recovered Covenant equipment. Her spy's instincts were invaluable for predicting enemy strategy. John pulled up the installation map, his tactical computer running probability matrices based on 3 decades of fighting Covenant doctrine. He'll hit the most isolated sites, places where our response time is longest, and he'll target installations that are geographically critical to the synchronization network. The map highlighted 2 locations, one in the Amazon rainforest, another in Antarctica. Both were remote, difficult to reinforce quickly, and based on the Forerunner AI's calculations, both were essential nodes in the dimensional stabilization network. Amazon site is currently unsecured, Lasky reported. We've got a SHIELD team inbound, ETA 20 minutes. Antarctica, nobody's there yet. The installation only activated 2 hours ago, and we've been prioritizing more accessible sites. Then those are his targets, John said with absolute certainty. He'll hit them hard, probably, with multiple lances, and try to either destroy the installations or hold them long enough that we can't complete synchronization before dimensional collapse. Thor hefted Mjolnir, lightning already beginning to arc across his armor. Then we must reach them first. Chief, can your vessel transport us? Pelican to Antarctica would take too long, John calculated. We'd need... Bifrost, Thor interrupted. The Rainbow Bridge of Asgard can transport us across Midgard instantly. I can take perhaps 4 others with me. Choose wisely. We face unknown numbers in hostile conditions at the bottom of your world. Steve's voice came through firm and resolute. I'm going. S.H.I.E.L.D. can hold Colorado without me, and I've fought in winter conditions before. I'm in, Tony added. My armor handles extreme cold better than flesh and blood. Plus, somebody needs to provide air support. Natasha? John asked. Already packing? She replied. Antarctica, Amazon rainforest. I've infiltrated worse. Places with worse odds. That left 1 slot. John considered the tactical requirements. Extreme environment, unknown enemy strength, time-critical mission, potential for high-intensity combat. He needed someone who could fight at Spartan-level effectiveness while operating independently. Commander Palmer, John said, meet us at the Siberia site for Bifrost transport. Already on my way, Chief, Palmer replied, and he could hear the grin in her voice. Told you I get all the fun assignments. What about the Amazon site? Lasky asked. If the Covenant hits both simultaneously. Fire Team Osiris and Fire Team Majestic converge there, John ordered. Buck has jungle warfare experience from his ODST days. Locke can coordinate with local authorities. They hold until we can support from Antarctica. And if the Covenant carrier interferes? Fury asked, always focused on the worst-case scenario. Then Infinity demonstrates why she's the most powerful ship in the UNSC fleet, Lasky said, his voice carrying the weight of command. All hands, battle stations, charging main max. If that carrier moves against our ground forces, we will end it. The pieces were moving into position, across Earth, at 17 sites. Humanity from 2 dimensions prepared to fight for their collective survival. S.H.I.E.L.D. agents checked weapons alongside Vindication survivors who'd crossed realities hunting their own demons. Russian soldiers coordinated with American forces despite decades of geopolitical tension. Chinese military units established perimeters around Forerunner installations on their soil, working with UNSC Spartans who'd fought wars they'd never heard of. And everywhere, the Covenant's religious zealots prepared for what they believed would be their final triumph, the reclamation of sacred artifacts that would restore their broken faith and justify 30 years of genocidal warfare. They were about to learn that faith, however strong, breaks against the absolute refusal to surrender that defines humanity at its best. John stood in the Siberian installation's chamber as Palmer arrived in a Pelican that landed with controlled urgency. She emerged in full Spartan armor, her weapons load enough to fight a small war, and moved to join the team with practiced efficiency. Thor, John said, we're ready. The god of thunder raised Mjolnir skyward, and the chamber filled with prismatic light that made Forerunner technology look mundane by comparison. Heimdall, Thor's voice boomed with divine authority. Open the Bifrost, we ride to battle at the bottom of the world. The light intensified, becoming a column of rainbow radiance that defied physics and laughed at distance. Space folded, reality bent, and 5 warriors from 3 different worlds vanished from Siberia in an explosion of Asgardian power that the Forerunner AI observed with what might have been digital appreciation. They materialized in Antarctica, on a plateau of ice that stretched endlessly in every direction under a sky filled with aurora australis. The temperature was -60°C. Wind screamed across the ice at speeds that would strip flesh from bone. And rising from the frozen wasteland like a monument to impossible civilizations was a Forerunner installation that dwarfed anything they'd seen. A spire of angular architecture that reached a kilometer into the sky, covered in symbols that pulsed with urgent warning. "Well," Tony said, his armor's environmental systems working overtime, "this definitely makes the top 10 list of places Tony Stark never wanted to visit." "Contact," John said flatly, his motion tracker already painting hostiles. Not dozens, not hundreds. Covenant battle group, full strength. Artas Vadum brought everything he had left. Through the swirling snow, shapes materialized, phantoms landing in formation, disgorging elites in numbers that suggested this wasn't a raid. It was an army. Over 200 Covenant warriors, supported by Wraith tanks whose plasma mortars could reduce their defensive position to slag. And at the center of it all, a gold-armored figure whose presence commanded absolute authority. Shipmaster Artas Vadum had come personally. "Demon?" The shipmaster's voice boomed across the ice, amplified by his armor's speakers. "I know you are here. The servants of the abiding truth have tracked you across dimensions, followed you through the void between realities. You ended our holy war in your dimension. You will not prevent its rebirth in this one." John checked his ammunition. 1 magazine for the assault rifle, half a magazine for the Magnum. His shields were at full charge, but against 200 elites that would last seconds. Palmer had similar loadout. Steve's shield was indestructible, but his ammunition was finite. Natasha was deadly, but fundamentally human. Tony had power reserves, but sustained combat against this many foes would drain even an arc reactor. By any objective analysis, they were outnumbered 40-1 against warriors who'd spent millennia perfecting the art of war. Thor must have sensed his assessment because the Asgardian placed a hand on John's shoulder, the gesture casual, but carrying the weight of divine reassurance. "Master Chief, you think like a mortal counting soldiers and measuring ammunition. I think like a god who has fought impossible battles since before your civilization learned to forge bronze. We are not outnumbered. They are simply overconfident." Lightning began to build around Mjolnir, arcing between snowflakes and turning the Antarctic night into a storm of divine power. "Besides," Thor continued, his grin visible even through the howling wind, "I have learned something from fighting alongside mortals. You do not win because you have superior numbers or greater power. You win because when the universe says surrender, you look it in the eye and say, no." John felt something he rarely experienced. Not hope exactly, but the cold certainty that impossible odds were just another tactical variable to be managed. He'd faced worse. He'd survived worse. And he'd never learned how to lose. "All units, this is Master Chief," he transmitted to every team across the globe. "We're engaging at Antarctica. Whatever happens here, complete your missions. Secure those installations. When we give the synchronization signal, you activate them. No hesitation, no second guessing. We end this." "Understood," Lasky replied. "Spartans, show them why they should have stayed in their own dimension." John raised his assault rifle, and beside him, 4 warriors from 3 worlds prepared to fight an army. "Spartans never die," Palmer said, her voice carrying the motto they'd all learned. "They're just missing in action." "Avengers assemble," Steve added, his shield raised. "For Asgard and Midgard," Thor declared, lightning dancing across his form. Natasha simply checked her weapons and smiled the cold smile of someone who'd learned long ago that survival wasn't about fair fights. It was about being more ruthless than your enemies. Tony's repulsors charged with a whine that cut through the wind. "Jarvis, play Thunderstruck. If we're doing the impossible, we're doing it with a soundtrack." The Covenant army charged across the ice, 200 warriors who'd crossed dimensions for holy vengeance. 5 defenders stood their ground, and the Battle of Antarctica began. The dimensional stabilization protocol activated with a pulse of energy that rippled across Earth's surface like a shockwave made of mathematics and Forerunner will. At 17 installations simultaneously, human hands, Spartans, shield agents, Vindication survivors, even Russian and Chinese military personnel who'd been granted emergency reclaimer authorization, pressed holographic interfaces and spoke authorization codes in a dozen different languages. The Forerunner network responded. Reality itself seemed to exhale as the dimensional rifts began to seal, each one collapsing in a cascade of exotic particles that made quantum physicists watching from observation posts question everything they thought they knew about physics. The tiers between universes closed like wounds healing, and the multiverse stabilized. At the Antarctica installation, Master Chief stood among the aftermath of a battle that would be classified, debated, and ultimately dismissed as impossible by those who hadn't witnessed it. 200 Covenant warriors had charged across the ice. 47 had survived to be taken into custody by a hastily assembled international task force that included UNSC Marines, shield agents, and military units from 12 different nations. Shipmaster Ertas Vadum was not among the survivors. The elite commander had fallen in single combat with Thor, who'd honored his opponent's warrior's skill even while ending his crusade permanently. The Asgardian stood now on the installation's spire, Mjolnir raised to the aurora-filled sky, calling the Bifrost to return them home. Palmer's armor was scorched and dented. Her shields had failed twice during the battle, and she'd expended every round of ammunition she'd carried. But she was alive, grinning with the fierce satisfaction of a warrior who'd faced impossible odds and emerged victorious. "Chief, remind me to requisition more ammunition next time you plan to fight an army." "Noted," John replied. His own armor had taken severe damage. His shields had collapsed completely 3 times, his left pauldron was cracked, and his HUD showed multiple systems operating at degraded capacity. But he was functional. Spartans didn't measure success by how much damage they avoided, but by whether they completed the mission. Mission accomplished. Steve Rogers limped slightly, his supersoldier healing already working on a plasma burn that had found a gap in his tactical gear. His shield was pristine. Vibranium didn't care about energy swords or plasma fire. But the man behind it had learned what 3 decades of war against genocidal aliens did to the human spirit. "You people live this every day," he said quietly to John. "For 30 years. "We did what was necessary," John replied. "Same as you did in your war. Same as everyone does when extinction is the alternative." Tony's armor had held, but his arc reactor was running at 15% capacity, and Jarvis was reporting damage to 17 major systems. Note to self: fighting 200 aliens in Antarctica is officially crazier than flying a nuke through a portal, and that's saying something. Natasha stood apart, checking her weapons with mechanical precision even though the battle was over. Spies never truly relaxed. There was always another threat, another mission, another impossible situation that required someone willing to do the ugly work. But she'd fought alongside Spartans now, seen what enhanced humans created for warfare could accomplish when properly motivated. The parallels to the Red Room were obvious and uncomfortable. "It's over," she said. Not quite a question. "The immediate crisis is over," John corrected. "The dimensional rifts are sealed. The Covenant remnants are scattered or captured. The Forerunner installations are secured under international oversight with UNSC consultation. But the larger questions. He didn't finish, but he didn't need to. The larger questions would take years to answer. How? Did multiple dimensions connect to this Earth? Were there other realities that might try to cross over? What happened to the Covenant forces still scattered across this dimension? And most critically, could the UNSC find a way home? Aboard Infinity, Captain Lasky stood on the bridge watching Earth through the viewport, a planet that looked so much like home but wasn't. His ship was damaged but operational. His crew was exhausted but alive. And they'd just saved a world that didn't even know to build orbital defense platforms. "Sir," the navigation officer reported, "the dimensional rift that brought us here has completely sealed. No trace of the original rupture remains. Engineering estimates it would take months, possibly years, to generate enough power to force a return passage. And that's assuming we could even calculate the correct dimensional coordinates." Lasky absorbed that. 17,000 UNSC personnel, stranded in an alternate dimension with no way home and no orders to follow. By every regulation, they should attempt to return to their proper reality. But regulations were written by people who'd never faced the reality of dimensional travel. "Helm, maintain geosynchronous orbit above North America," Lasky ordered. "Communications, open a channel to SHIELD, the Avengers, and anyone else who's been coordinating with us. It's time we had a conversation about what comes next." That conversation happened in a UN assembly hall, hastily converted into a command center where humanity from two dimensions tried to figure out how to coexist. Fury represented Earth's intelligence and defense networks. Steve Rogers spoke for the Avengers. Military representatives from 24 nations sat in careful diplomatic formations. And Captain Lasky, with Master Chief at his side, represented the UNSC. "We're not conquerors," Lasky said simply. "We're not here to impose our will or our technology. But we're also not leaving. We can't, even if we wanted to. The Sigido Ralbrons, dimensional barriers are sealed, and forcing them open would risk exactly the kind of cascade failure we just prevented. So the question is, what do we do now?" The debate that followed lasted 3 days. Some nations wanted the UNSC to disarm and integrate into existing military structures. Others saw Infinity as a potential defense asset against future cosmic threats. The Avengers advocated for partnership rather than subordination. And the Vindication survivors, the 300 UNSC personnel who'd escaped their ship's destruction, provided sobering testimony about what happened when military power existed without proper oversight. The compromise, when it finally emerged, was imperfect but workable. Infinity would remain an independent vessel under UNSC command, but would operate under a joint oversight council that included representatives from multiple nations, SHIELD, and the Avengers. The Forerunner installations would be secured by international task forces with UNSC technical advisors. And most critically, no dimensional travel experiments would be attempted without unanimous approval from all parties. It wasn't perfect. It required trust between entities that had every reason to be suspicious. But it was better than the alternatives. In the weeks that followed, Earth learned to adjust to its new reality. News organizations struggled to explain alien invasions and alternate dimensions to a public that had only just accepted that gods and superheroes existed. Scientists formed research partnerships with UNSC engineers, each side learning from the other's 3 decades of divergent technological development. And slowly, carefully, the Covenant prisoners began providing intelligence about the servants of the abiding truth, how many had crossed over, where they'd established bases, what their ultimate goals had been. Master Chief stood in Infinity's observation deck, watching Earth rotate below. Cortana would have had something sardonic to say about the political compromises, something insightful about the technological exchanges, something warmly human about the connections forming between dimensions. But Cortana was gone, and John was still here, doing what Spartans always did: adapting, surviving, protecting humanity even when humanity existed in a dimension that wasn't his own. "Chief." It was Palmer, out of armor for once, looking almost civilian in standard duty uniform. "Lasky wants to see you. Something about a new mission." "What kind of mission?" "The kind that involves Forerunner installations we haven't secured yet, possible Covenant holdouts in South America. And apparently Thor volunteered us to help investigate some mystical disturbance in Scandinavia that might be dimensional bleed-through." She paused. Just another Tuesday in our new dimension. John checked his armor, already repaired and ready, and followed Palmer toward the briefing room. Behind him, Earth continued its rotation, a blue-green marble that now had orbital defense platforms designed by UNSC engineers working alongside Stark Industries, protected by Spartans who'd crossed dimensions and Avengers who'd learned to fight wars they'd never imagined. The Covenant had wanted to reclaim their holy war. Instead, they'd united two versions of humanity in common cause. The dimensional rifts had threatened to tear reality apart. Instead, they'd brought together warriors from multiple worlds who'd learned that survival required cooperation, not conquest. Master Chief John 117 had spent 30 years fighting for humanity's survival in his dimension. Now he'd do the same for this one, because Spartans didn't measure loyalty by which Earth they protected. They measured it by whether humanity survived at the end. And as long as Spartans stood watch, humanity in any dimension would never face extinction alone. The universe was infinite. The threats were endless. The odds were always impossible. But that had never stopped a Spartan before.